Good afternoon, and welcome to the National Transportation Safety Board's webinar, Implementing an SMS in Small to Mid-Sized Aviation Operations. Thank you for joining us. I am Michael Graham, a board member with the NTSB, and I'm very pleased today to be moderating this important discussion. At this time, can I ask everyone to ensure their cameras and microphones are off? With the advent of safety management systems, safety is moving from the back office to the front office. SMS elevates safety-conscious behavior to the forefront of any sized organization, every day, every task. An effective SMS is a formal, organization-wide system for proactive, predictive, and responsive risk management. This allows the organizations of all sizes to identify and mitigate hazards before an incident occurs. The most important part of an SMS is employee engagement and their full participation. Each employee of an organization, no matter the size, must be empowered and understand that they are the safety officer of the operation. Without their reporting and involvement, the operation will not see the many hazards and risks that are facing the operation daily. The NTSB has investigated numerous accidents involving operations of all sizes that could have been prevented by an effective SMS. The NTSB believes so strongly in SMS that we added require and verify the effectiveness of safety management systems in all revenue passenger carrying operations to the NTSB's 2021 to 2023 Most Wanted list. And when we say all revenue passenger carrying operations should implement an effective SMS, we mean all. Whether your operation flies 300 jets all over the country or 3 helicopters touring the Grand Canyon, the NTSB believes that an effective safety management system is scalable and should be implemented by all operators. Operators of all sizes have scaled their SMS to fit their operations and regularly identify, assess, and mitigate the risk to their operations. However, I often hear from small and mid-sized operators who do not have an SMS that they are too small or their operations are not complex enough for an SMS. We hope to dispel that myth today and show how an SMS can be scaled to fit the needs of your operation, no matter the size. Our first guest today is Dale Whitmer with the FAA's Office of Aviation Safety, Safety Analysis and Promotion Division, who will provide the FAA's perspective on SMS and scalability. Now, let me take this opportunity to pause and address the FAA's recent published Notice of Proposed Rulemaking that proposes to require SMS for Part 135 operators, air tour operators under Part 91, and certain certificate holders under Part 21. The NTSB strongly supports the intent of the rulemaking and believes the proposed rule would improve aviation safety for the operators covered. Our full comments are available on the website or in the public docket. While this proposed rule may be the top of mind for some of you, we intend for this webinar to demonstrate that operators of all sizes will benefit from voluntarily implementing an effective SMS today. Do not wait for regulation. The next presenter will be Dr. Bill Bramble, an NTSB National Resource Specialist for Human Performance from the Office of Aviation Safety. Dr. Bramble will discuss critical insights from the NTSB's accident investigations that highlight the need for an SMS in operations of all sizes, as well as recommendations we have made to the FAA. We will then hear from operators like you. We have invited 6 small and medium-sized operators to discuss their experience implementing an SMS. We have split the operators into 2 groups. In the first group are 2 operators, Open Air and Aerotech Services, who are working towards implementing a fully effective safety management system, but have not finalized or formalized their processes and procedures. These 2 operators will share why they wanted to begin implementing an SMS, what challenges they've encountered with implementation, and how they plan to overcome those challenges. In the second group, we will hear from 4 small or mid-sized operators who have a fully implemented safety management.
It was something that I saw on the
Can you check your microphones off, please? Thank you. So in the second group, we'll hear from 4 or small or mid-size operators who have fully implemented safety management systems. They are 7-Bar Aviation, Boston Med Flight, Jet Access, and Blue Hawaiian Helicopters. And they will share their lessons learned and best practices for how they successfully navigated the SMS implementation obstacles and fully integrated an SMS into their operation. After the second group of operators, we invite both groups of operators and Dr. Bramble back on for a question and answer session to end the webinar. As you listen to our discussions, I encourage you to submit your questions using the Zoom chat box. Our own aviation accident investigator, Aaron McCarter, will monitor the chat, and we will try to answer as many of those questions as time allows. I also wanted to note quickly that some third-party programs and services may be discussed today by certain operators. The NTSB does not specifically endorse any third-party SMS program or service. While some operators may provide this information as an example of what works for them, we recognize that there are a variety of products and offerings available to help operators establish and maintain an SMS. We encourage you to do your homework to find what works for you. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Dale Whitmore, the SMS Program Office Manager for the FAA's Office of Aviation Safety, Safety Analysis, and Promotion Division. Dale, if you turn on your camera and unmute your mic, and you have the controls of the webinar.
All right. Thank you, Member Graham. Do we have a thumbs up on seeing the presentation?
We got you, Dale.
Okay, very good. Thank you. I really appreciate the NTSB contacting the FAA. We're happy to share the platform with our practitioners and user groups out in providing aviation service to the public. And so this is a special privilege for us. I am the SMS Program Office Manager, and I reside in the Safety Analysis and Promotion Division in Flight Standards, which basically means that we support our field office, certificate management offices, and also our FSDOs with work products that they use to perform their oversight duties. So that's who I am, and that's who I represent today, is the SMS Program Office. So Member Graham set the expectations. We'd all love to talk about the new Part 5 rule, but we can't. Right now it's in deliberation, and they're moving swiftly through comments that many of you may have provided to us. And so things are going well, and we're looking forward to the outcomes of the new Part 5. One of the things that I wanted to discuss with you is the FAA's performance-based rules and how that impacts scalability, or the concept of scalability. A performance-based rule basically means to the FAA that we'll set some expectations and describe the intent of the rule, which is basically found in a preamble to the rule. And that basically it provides you, the service provider, an opportunity to develop processes to support the intent. All right. So a lot of times what that means is that as you read the rule, don't go by face value of what the rule says in its short form, like 571, 573, and just reading it and putting it in that perspective, but actually go back and read the preamble and determine what the intent of the rule is. That will be more beneficial for you than just reading the raw rule requirements that may lead you to developing some things that may not meet the intent of the rule. So what is scalability? Scalability and applicability are often confused. All right. So applicability means that I either have to meet the requirement of a rule or I don't have to meet the requirement of the rule. Many of our FAR parts are set up in that concept that a 121 has more applicabilities than, say, a 135 with regards to developing processes in the performance of their service. All right. So in that sense, there is some scaling that occurs just in the development of a rule, but that's not the scaling that we're talking about when we talk about meeting the intent of the rule. So scalability is about developing processes that are right sized to your organization. And so with that said, the FAA develops minimum requirements or minimum safety requirements. And then the processes that you build actually are the higher level of safety that the FAA looks for. So scalability is that we have a rule. Everyone that it's applicable to can scale the process that supports that intent of that rule to the size and scope of their operation. So I hope that made sense. Now, so why do people struggle with the scalability concept? Basically because we have a finite knowledge and experience level. So there are things that we haven't seen that could be possible in right-sizing a process to your organization. Let me provide a quick example. In the current Part 5 rule, there's a requirement to conduct audits. And that's all it says. The rule is not prescriptive in any other application of the audit concept. So what is an audit to you? If your experience has been that you have an experienced auditor that has been trained and qualified, that uses an audit checklist, develops an audit report, then that's likely what you may build for your system. But is that the right size? Is that audit process the right size to your system? Well, let's go look back at the intent, go back into the preamble. What is the purpose of an audit? Well, the purpose would be to monitor your system, to look for possible gaps in the system that may cause failure, or nonconformances that have already occurred. So the concept there is about monitoring the system. So the question you should ask yourself, instead of jumping right into developing a process for audits, is what do I do right now to monitor my system? If an audit is gathering information and reviewing that information to demonstrate whether I'm meeting expected outcomes, then could I do that at the end of the day? Look over my flight manifest, look over to see whatever notes I've made from that flight that I may have identified a hazard that's been introduced in the system. One of my processes that I used did not work out right, and I was subject to some type of potential failure that I caught just in the nick of time. How many times has that happened to all of us? Is where at the last minute we salvage the outcome because we take notice that there's something wrong and we just take action on that. Well, if you collect information, review information at the end of the day, at the end of the week, at the end of the month, or some extended period of time, a year down the road, with a look back audit, which is traditionally what our structured audits are looking back into the system to see what may have already failed. You're conducting data collection, analysis, and possible correction. Now the question that I have for you is, what do you do that would fit in the context of an audit with that interpretation? So again, just to support the information on this slide, is that look at what the intent of the rule is. Put that in the forefront of your thinking about how you conduct business and the things that you do in your business operation that would support the concept, and then determine if you meet the requirements set forth in the rule. So why SMS, I guess, is the main question. Why is this important to me? And Member Graham was very explicit, and I agree with his viewpoint that an SMS can help anybody that's running a business. All right. Why does it benefit me? Like, for example, I think single pilot was brought up. Why would a single pilot be interested in adding this structure into their system? Well, we know that structure added to a system improves outcomes. I mean, just like the rest of you, I come out with a lot better outcomes if I take a shopping list with me to the grocery store. Putting that little piece of structure in saves me a lot of grief and probably helps me get fed that evening because I remember to get the right ingredients for what my family was cooking up for the evening meal. So structure, and we look at our more structured group, the 121, the airline group, they have a lot of structure. And what do we see in the data? High reliable outcomes, 0 accident rate because of structure. So what is important with the SMS is it helps put structure into the system to improve the outcomes, and that's really what we're looking for in the development of this regulation, is that there are structures that you can put into your system that will benefit you. It benefits you in productivity, because the idea is that we want reliable processes that don't fail. All right. And we want to maintain those processes over a period of time as our operational environment changes. So if we develop good processes with safety built in, those regulatory requirements built in, and we monitor our system over time, then we'll have future successes in the outcomes that are obtained from having reliable processes. So that's a win-win situation for anybody. Whether you're running your business and your focus is on profitability, staying in business, structure will help that, and the applications for safety that are identified in the SMS helps in that area too, because it is a management system, and these processes can be applied across the many dimensions of your organization. So with that conclusion is that you all have an SMS already. It may not be a capital SMS, it may not be totally Part 5 compliant, but you're not starting from ground zero. You are doing things in your organization. You are following processes. Those processes, by regulation, have safety built in. You've added some additional process controls to ensure that you're going to meet the outcomes and expectations that you have for the system. And so you already have that management system in place, and you already have a head start on developing what we call a capital SMS or a Part 5 compliant SMS, as recognized by the FAA. Now, with that said, you just need to, when you compare what you have versus Part 5, you just need to do what we call a gap analysis and say, how does my organization already work? And what are the gaps between what I'm doing now and these requirements in Part 5? And if you can, the best outcomes are when you tweak what you're already doing to add the additional structure to meet the Part 5 rule. Now, the FAA is not going to value judge what you decide to do. All right. It's in other words, if you decide to develop a very complex process for a very simple application, if it meets regulatory requirements, we're going to say, good to go. And then we will come out and check the performance of that process against the requirements and against your outcomes, your performance outcomes. What we run into a lot is that next line down, or that next point, is that oftentimes, because we overbuild our system, we implement unsustainable processes. All right, so that's kind of like the New Year's resolution, just for the short example. At the end of the year, we have the New Year's resolution. We want to lose, 20 pounds or whatever. And so we're going to go on this, we're going to start drinking these protein shakes every day. And we're going to try to stick to that structure every day for the next couple of months to get rid of those pounds. Well, how many of us succeed in that, and how many of us fail in that application? And the idea here is that you should not be submitting processes to please the FAA. You should be implementing processes that work for your system, that meets the intent of the requirement. And that's a very important point to make. What works good for one organization, say this has worked really good for us, may not work for you. Some organizations, because of their size and complexity, have to have some type of IT support. Remember, Graham was talking about all the IT products out there, available to you. However, you don't need to use IT products to be successful in implementation of an SMS. Just about everybody on this call probably has one of these things, the cell phone, and you probably can do a lot of your work right off of this little mini computer. And I'm sorry that it's not there. I've got to bring it more to the center. That little mini computer can do wonders to help support your system, provide some documentation. If it's connected to the cloud, you got some records and backup of your records. There's all kinds of ways that will work more specifically for you than some generic, here's how you can meet the FAA requirement, but quite frankly, probably is not right sized for your organization. So this thing about sustainable processes is critical, is that we're looking for processes that work, not processes to please the FAA administrator. Now, one of the things that may be obvious, but I was surprised when this point came up, is that you can change your processes. So at some point, you would implement your Part 5 compliant process. The FAA would come and validate it, that it meets regulatory requirements. And then you put that practice or that process into practice. And you find out that this just isn't working for our organization. Well, guess what? You can change that process. You're not stuck with what you gave the FAA or what you told the FAA, this is the way I'm going to conduct business. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. And it's not helping anyone with regards to safety enhancement. It's not helping anyone if it's a non-sustainable, non-working process. So I'd encourage you that as you go through and mature your system, that's what we mean by maturing your SMS. As you mature your system, you will find out the best efficiencies and effective ways and means to implement certain process structures that will improve your performance of your system. I will say even to the point of improving your business performance. And you need to find where that sweet spot is. I think that's a term that many of us have used. There's a sweet spot for your organization. You need to find out what it is. You can use we've got some really good consultant groups out there that can expand your ideas and concepts on different implementation practices. The participants this afternoon, through the afternoon, are going to talk to you about some of their experiences and some of their implementation practices that may work for you, or you can modify those practices to make it right-sized. And so these are great opportunities to collaborate with one another, collaborate with the FAA, and also with those industry groups that are there to support you. So finally, I just want to wrap things up so I'm not going over time, the FAA has some what we call GA safety outreach products available to you online. That one in the center, 123, that's talking about basically process flow of our SMS voluntary program. And we have videos and we have different documents that will be of value to you. One thing that I would like to annotate is that we have a new AC 12092 that will be coming out with a new rule. It's been kind of in abeyance for the last 2 years. We wanted to get it out there sooner because our 12092B is somewhat outdated. We have updated the 12092 to include more implementation practices and concepts with regards to small, medium, and large operators. We think we'll find great value in that. It will be coming out with the final form of the new Part 5. So I would just encourage you to be looking for that document. I think it'll provide you good value. So finally, went too far, excuse me. This is our website for the FAA GA Safety Outreach Initiative. That's where you can find it on the URL. And if you are so inclined to contact the SMS program office, we'd be happy to talk with you about implementation of SMS. We're interested in raising the bar on aviation safety with you, the practitioner. And that's our basically our email address that you can use. With that said, I'll turn it back over to Member Graham. Thank you.
Thank you, Dale, so much. You can go ahead and unshare your screen. I appreciate that. I really appreciate you discussing the FAA's perspectives on SMS and helping set the groundwork for this discussion. Next up, we have NTSB's National Resource Specialist for Human Performance from the Office of Aviation Safety, and that's Dr. Bill Bramble. And I see him coming up. Bill, you have control of the webinar.
Hello, thank you, Member Graham. Let me just get my slides up here. Okay. All right, good afternoon. I'll be discussing NTSB findings and recommendations related to SMS. The NTSB began issuing SMS-related recommendations in 2007, spurred by investigative findings about problems with flight crew professionalism, risk management, and procedural noncompliance, and by evidence that organizations were not adequately managing these issues. Accidents leading to the recommendations included the crash of Pinnacle Airlines Flight 3701, involving a Part 121 flight crew's unprofessional behavior during a Part 91 repositioning flight, the crash of a Part 91 flight operated by NASCAR that involved shortcomings in risk management with respect to maintenance, a series of accidents involving Part 91 and Part 135 helicopter emergency medical services flights stemming from multiple issues, an accident involving a Part 135 flight operated by ExecuFlight that involved flight crew procedural noncompliance, a Part 91 hot air balloon accident that involved problems with weather-related risk management, the ditching of a Part 91 sightseeing flight operated by Liberty Helicopters that involved fatalities due to problems with passenger safety equipment, and an accident involving a Part 135 sightseeing flight operated by Safari Helicopters that involved deficiencies in operator safety assurance related to pilots' weather-related decision-making. As a result of these accidents, NTSB issued several recommendations urging the FAA to require or encourage SMS. In 2007, we recommended the FAA require SMS for Part 121 carriers. In 2009, we recommended the FAA encourage SMS for Part 91 business operators and require it for helicopter emergency medical services operators. In 2016, we recommended the FAA require it for all Part 135 operators. In 2019, we urged the FAA to require it for all air tour flights, regardless of rule. In 2021, we recommended the FAA require it for all Part 91 revenue passenger flights. And in 2022, the NTSB recommended that the FAA issue guidance on the scaling of SMS for small operators. In response, the FAA introduced Advisory Circular 120-92, Safety Management Systems for Aviation Service Providers, issued a rule requiring SMS for Part 121 air carriers, and in January of this year, proposed SMS requirements for Part 135 operators, air tour operators, and certain aviation manufacturers. Many NTSB investigations have identified organizational deficiencies affecting safety management that could be improved by SMS. These include pathological safety cultures, blurred lines of authority and responsibility, and missing, incomplete, or otherwise dysfunctional safety systems. Dysfunctional safety systems can lead to a lack of awareness about the existence, prevalence, or severity of hazards, a lack of effort to systematically address known hazards, and a lack of insight about the ineffectiveness of some existing risk controls. As described by sociologist Ron Westrom and discussed in James Reason's landmark book, Managing the Risks of Organizational Accidents, organizations with pathological safety cultures don't want to know about hazards, ignore messengers who report them, shirk responsibility for addressing them, punish or conceal failure, and discourage new ideas. Pathological safety cultures prevent the effective implementation of SMS. The photo at the top of this slide shows the wreckage of a helicopter that crashed during a search and rescue flight. In that case, the board determined that the aviation section for a state's Department of Public Safety had a punitive culture that impeded the free flow of safety information and impaired the organization's ability to identify and address safety deficiencies relevant to the accident. The bottom photo shows the wreckage of a Part 135 sightseeing flight. In that case, the board found a company culture that tacitly endorsed flying in hazardous weather. There are many other examples in the NTSB's case files. Sometimes more than one organization is involved in the booking and operation of a flight or the maintenance of its aircraft. Relationships between companies can be complex. However, it is essential that the carrier operating the flight maintain core aspects of operational control Because a company cannot manage safety-related aspects of operations it does not adequately control. The NTSB identified this issue in its investigation of an accident involving a Part 135 operator and a marketing company that recruited passengers for doors-off sightseeing flights. The operator provided the helicopters, pilots, and maintenance, and the marketing company recruited the passengers and equipped them with safety gear. The operator's pilots identified safety issues with the gear, but the marketing company dragged its feet on replacing it. The equipment later played a role in the drowning deaths of 5 passengers following a loss of power and ditching in New York's East River. The NTSB found that the Part 135 operator's management had ceded core aspects of operational control to the marketing company, limiting the operator's ability to manage the safety of its own flights. Some companies are unaware of significant hazards to their operation. SMS facilitates the identification of hazards through active risk assessment and safety assurance. Such processes can alert an operator to the presence of hazards, which allows them to be addressed. An operator lacking such processes may be blind to certain hazards, leaving them vulnerable. This is problematic because a company cannot manage what it does not know about. An example can be found in the board's investigation of a crash involving a Part 135 sightseeing flight. The accident occurred when a pilot followed a more experienced pilot into deteriorating weather, became lost, and struck terrain. Company managers were unaware that the pilot had written in his logbook and confided in 2 colleagues 2 weeks earlier that he struck trees with his airplane's floats and nearly had an accident. Because managers were unaware of the incident, they did not have an opportunity to develop mitigation strategies for preventing a recurrence. In the case involving the doors-off helicopter flight, the operator's pilots had reported hazards involving poor fit and inaccessible harness attachment points, as well as ineffective emergency knives. These problems posed a serious risk to passenger safety in the event of a ditching or post-crash fire. Pilots were assured that their concerns would be addressed, but because neither organization had an SMS, their request was deemed not urgent and deprioritized over time. SMS tracks reported safety issues and promotes timely implementation of risk mitigation strategies for the most significant hazards. Last, organizations that do not monitor the effectiveness of existing risk controls may have an overly optimistic idea about their integrity. In this accident involving a Part 91 business flight, a crew did not follow best practices for the execution of normal checklists or complete a flight control check before attempting to take off. As a result, they did not realize that they had left a gust lock engaged. Data from the airplane's quick access recorder revealed that the same crew had neglected a flight control check before 98% of previous takeoffs. A subsequent study by the National Business Aviation Association Safety Committee found a surprisingly high level of noncompliance with flight control checks, indicating a long-established safety protection was not as effective as assumed. In short, an organization can be lulled into complacency by a lack of information about how well its existing safety protections are actually working. Organizations can combat this by performing safety assurance. In closing, organizational deficiencies identified in NTSB safety investigations could be addressed through SMS. The processes an operator uses to implement SMS will vary depending on the nature and complexity of operations, but every operator can do the following: establish management accountability for and commitment to safety, establish resources and policy for safety management, identify hazards and assess risk, implement risk mitigation strategies, monitor their effectiveness, keep employees informed about safety efforts and enlist their participation, and last but not least, foster an organizational culture that facilitates active safety management. For more information on the NTSB's advocacy efforts in this area, see the board's website, www.ntsb.gov. Thank you for your attention, and I look forward to seeing the other presenters.
Thank you, Dr. Bramble. I really appreciate that. And so next up, we want to hear from our first group of operators who have begun implementing an SMS and are working to formalize and finalize their processes and procedures. Let's start with Captain Ben Berman, Director of Safety and Chief Pilot for Open Air. Captain Berman, screen on, mic on, and you can go ahead and share your presentation, and you have the controls.
Thank you very much, Member Graham, and I'd like to thank you for inviting Open Air to participate. It's a pleasure to be with everybody. I want to talk to you a little bit about the SMS that we're doing at Open Air, and I call it a scale model because we're scaled to our very small size and a growing size that we need to rescale as we go along. Let me tell a little bit about Open Air. We were founded in 2005. We're a Part 135 carrier based in Gaithersburg, Maryland, and we fly most of our flights along the East Coast as far out as the Midwest. We also manage several aircraft under Part 91, and most of our operations are actually Part 91 operations for the airplane owners, with Part 135 being a lesser part of our total focus. We fly 5 Cirrus SR-22 piston airplanes, and then we have a fleet of 7 SF-50 Vision jets, which each carry up to 6 passengers and are fairly moderate performance single engine jets. KNR Aviation, which is called Open Air for public purposes, has 14 pilots, and most of our pilots are full-time professionals. They're all captain qualified in mostly both aircraft, jets and pistons, some only for one. And like I said, the bulk of our operations are Part 91. And so if you look at our Part 135 operations, you would see a fairly low aircraft utilization and low operations tempo. And everybody's busier with the owner flying. Our growth has been very rapid, especially the jet program recently. And with that, we've developed some unique operations that have inherent risks, mostly involving organ for transplant transportation and some operations in various parts of the country. We have an informal SMS, and what it is I looked at it at the situation of our starting jet operations and decided that we had to mitigate some risks and wanted to work as an SMS. And our SMS recognizes the 4 SMS pillars of safety policy, safety risk management, safety assurance, and safety promotion. And what I've done with our team is to try to find ways to make these pillars truly functional in our operation without being out of scale with where we are as an organization. So I'll go through those 4 pillars and tell you briefly how we're doing them right now and what we think we would like to do in the future. First of all, for safety policy, we have an annual gathering of our whole crew, which is combined with our Part 135 recurring ground training for the pilots. And as part of that, as the very first part of that, we recognize our accountable executive, who's the owner / president / CEO of our company, Mike Klein. And he every year has just stated straight out that safety is number one, and that's our policy, and that's what he believes in and wants everyone else to do. And so we do communicate it straight from the top, and we always start out our annual meeting with that. As part of that meeting, it often comes up, and then we try and bring this up verbally to our pilots when we're in a discussion about whether and how we're going to operate a flight. We say to them that if we don't cancel a flight every once in a while, we're not really probably running as safely as we should be. And so we'd like you to cancel a flight when you need to, and we'll support you in that. And we watch for flight cancellations as a positive safety indicator. So in that, we're trying to message safe operations to our pilots, and then we're trying to act that way and reinforce it through what we do. In safety risk management, we have a hazard reporting system. It's a suggestion box. I'll talk to you a little bit about that more later, but it's a box in the office, and pilots have, and non-pilots have put things in the suggestion box. Not a huge number of contributions, but some, and has resulted in some safety change. We are working on open reporting and just culture. And what that means to Open Air is that we live these concepts. We really feel that we have to reinforce our culture and establish our culture by being just and by acting that way as managers. And what it means to have a just culture is to have our pilots and other personnel know that they're not going to be punished for honest mistakes, and that we're going to encourage them to come to us and to have an interchange about information. Our risk evaluation process usually involves a lot of crosstalk during the pilot's flight planning process. They'll be talking to the people who are going to release the flight, who are the top operational managers, and there's a lot of back and forth discussion, and that's where the most of our risk evaluation takes place. We are trying to be a learning organization, and we're trying to have the feedback loops that are essential parts of safety management systems. So, for example, every year we focus on and review accidents. In the past, we've looked at accidents involving Cirrus SR-22s and SF-50s. Out of that has come a focus during our recurrent training and checking on low go-arounds, because we've seen a number of accidents involving pilots having loss of control during go-arounds. Just recently, we had an event where it wasn't our event, but Cirrus notified us in the form of a service bulletin that there was an issue with the parachute system of the SF-50 Vision jet. And in following the manufacturer's guidelines, we enhanced them. We weren't satisfied with what the manufacturer had done, and through a team process, we identified what had to be done to enhance it. We actually ended up changing our training that Cirrus does for us at their training center and having them implement some features that we'd like to tell you more about later if you'd like to know. So our safety assurance is done through auditing, and you can see the areas that we audit, and I'll talk to you about the shortcomings and where we go from that in our audit program, but we are doing audits in all of these areas. Safety promotion, going back to our annual ground school, we do an accident review and show the pilots and get a discussion going about all the accidents that happened, like I said, involving the SF-50 and SR-22. We need to enhance that by looking at all Part 135 accidents as well, so that's an area that we will go. We also are proud to have an open discussion of what has happened to our company in the past year. So we collect incidents that we'd like to talk about, and then the pilots bring up things they'd like to talk about. And basically, we have an open forum on what their experiences have been and what they think about it. And then, our group it's a very small group. We're talking about something that's taking place around a table in a conference room. And we're all talking about what's happened over the past year. We issue pilot bulletins. And just for example, we issued 2 bulletins on the SF-50 parachute issue. So just to summarize what we have right now, we have a functioning SMS. It fulfills all the characteristics of an SMS. We are finding out safety-related information. We're taking action on it. We're feeding it back into our training, into our operational procedures, into our operations, and it's continuing to enhance safety. It addresses all the 4 pillars of SMS, and it is scaled to a very small operation. We have not got any fancy computer systems. We haven't hired consultants at this time. We will consider it in the future. So our homegrown system is something that is working for us. It's certainly not perfect, and I'd be glad to go into some of the aspects where we're going to go in the near future as we get towards an approved SMS system. But I did want to point out that I don't really believe we should be drawing a distinction between an SMS with capital letters and a small letter SMS at this point. Ours would be considered a small letter SMS, but we do have these safety functions going on, and it's a very essential part of conducting safe operations at open air. So for our shortcomings and next steps, I'll just touch on these a little bit. But, we have a suggestion box for our hazard reporting. Come on, everybody, that's not good enough. Well, that's true. So we'd like to introduce electronic reporting that has protection for people who are reporting for anonymity. It's very difficult to do that in a small organization, perhaps through subcontracting. I think probably the most important thing that we can do is having more than one person to evaluate the safety information that we receive from our pilots and other personnel. And so we'll be enlarging our team to do that. We have to do this on a very small basis because, I want to pay the people who we have working on our safety, and we have support from the company to do that, but we can't blow our entire budget out of proportion here to build a giant safety team. And we're going to continue with our risk analysis and communication with our pilots. If you asked us, do we have a flight risk analysis process that pilots go through in a formal way before every flight? We don't. But we do risk analysis, and I'm very happy with what we're doing in it and very proud of it. I need to implement a better plan for our audits and better documentation of our results, and we need to do more safety promotion. So the bottom lines for us is to get more people involved and then better document what we're doing, both in terms of what our system is, what our SMS is, and then what we found out and what we're doing to make sure that the safety change is permanent. So I'll pause there and say thank you very much for having us here. We'll look forward to participating with the rest of the folks.
Thank you, Captain Berman, for that interesting presentation. Next up, I'd like to have Captain Paul Hadfield, Director of Safety for Aerotech Services. Go ahead and come on up, and you can turn on your microphone and your camera and go ahead and share your screen. There we go.
All right, can you hear me okay?
I can.
All right, well, thank you so much for having me. Aerotech Services, we're located in central Pennsylvania, Amish country. You can see our core values on the left side of the screen. We gauge everything we do based upon those 4 core values. And safety basically falls throughout all of those. Brief history for Aerotech Services. It originally started as a flight school, an aircraft rental company in Smoketown, Pennsylvania. Some of you may have had airplanes painted there by a different company, but that's where it started, little less than 3,000 foot strip. We currently are based in Lancaster. We have become now the 3rd busiest airport in Pennsylvania behind Philadelphia and Pittsburgh, and I think largely based upon our company, the operations that we have. And we do, and I'll go into kind of what we do. The Part 135 started with an Aztec, Navajo, Aerostars, and a Beech Baron. And that's where the 135 started. And then we kind of moved into the turbine world, which was a good thing. Right now in our Part 135 and 91 flight ops, we have 4 Pilatus PC-12s, 2 Lear 45s, and 14 full-time pilots. We operate basically East Coast a lot. Several of these aircraft are managed as well as leasebacks. So they're all used in the 135, but we do quite a few owner flights as well. Oops, sorry, I hit the wrong thing. So some of our statistics, this is 2022 for the 135 side. The hours aren't huge, but so quite a few operations for us, 912 separate trips, 3,100 legs and 4,200 hours flown across those 6 aircraft. Some flown more than others, but that's basically what we do on the 135 side. Our company also has a Part 141 and 61 flight school. We're partnered with a local university on the 141 side. In our 141 school, we have 10 single-engine aircraft, 1 multi-engine, and 1 simulator. And our flight school last year flew 8,200 hours, and we have anywhere usually between 9 and 14 instructors. We do have instructors coming and going. Once they build hours, they'll move on. Some have stayed for quite a while. It's a very vibrant flight school. We are very busy, and it's been a great addition, or it's not an addition, it's just part of the company. That's kind of part of our branding is our flight school. We also have a maintenance shop, and in that maintenance shop, we do between 60 and 70 100-hour inspections on our flight school aircraft. And we also do 10 to 12 inspections on our Part 135. We are getting more people schooled up on some of the turbine, bigger airplanes, the Pilatus and the Lears. We're doing some more inspections on the Lears in-house. We do send some of that out. We do most of the Pilatus PC-12 inspections. Sometimes there's some specialty things we need to take to a service center, but other than that, that's that's part of what our maintenance shop does. We also have 10 to 12 outside regular customers for annuals. Plus, we do have oil changes and all that stuff that drops in on occasion that we try to help folks with. A flat tire, whatever, we get a lot of that during the day. So our current SMS program, it is implemented company-wide. We are not just doing it on the 135 side. We are implementing it across the company all the way down. We have close to 50 employees, and it's all employees. It is from our schedulers, our finance people, flight instructors, mechanics. Everyone gets trained and continues training throughout the year. And that's an important thing for us because, we're kind of a family. We're close, and we definitely want, we want everybody to be safe. And so everything works together. We do use a third party to assist us with some of this. And so we can get, I know might be some questions about that, but that has been with manual development and primarily getting me up to speed on a lot of the SMS things that I need to be doing. It's been very helpful that way. And our program was basically initiated in 2020. That was actually before I started with the company, just slightly before. That SMS director left for another position. And so then I stepped in last year, and we're trying to go as full bore as we can, trying to get things ramped back up and going on the upslope. We do have our SMS manual in place. There's an ERP, that's part of the manual. So the emergency response plan is in there. We've got our key people in place on that. So we have a lot of the foundation set. And we also have an SMS team. They are all employees of the company, at least one person from every department. So administration, flight ops, we have flight instructors, maintenance personnel, and I'm also in there. And because I'm also one of the charter pilots, we have another one of our pilots that's there to give perspective. So that's been a good team that we're working well together. One of the things that we were asked to do is how has the SMS proven valuable for us? So trying to not be theoretical with this, I'm going to give a couple of very practical examples. One is we noticed some damage happening from towing and tugging aircraft. A lot of people have experienced this, and we realized we did not have a formal program of training our employees to tug and tow aircraft. And we have more than one type of tug. And so that program was initiated. We have somebody that's outside of the SMS team that has volunteered, and they do it on the company time. So they're not technically volunteering, but they're taking that on as an additional role. And they have basically written the program, the curriculum, and the checklists and all of that. And they manage our record of training for that, so that when we have folks that are new to the company or they need to tug with a different kind of different tug equipment, then they're trained on that, and then they're checked off and signed off. Another item is, this is a real rudimentary picture, but it was visitors in the maintenance shop. We had an incident where one of our mechanics was doing a compression check on an aircraft. The owner of the airplane walked in and just slightly distracted the technician and lost his grip. And if you're a mechanic and done a compression check, you got a couple stitches from that. So that enabled us, or made us think about, okay, what about our visitor policy and how are we going to handle that? So one of the things we did was we put yellow lines on the floor, put chains up that are like, okay, this is a place that we want to watch, that there's stuff going on here. We don't just want people to walk in the door, because, we have locals that like to walk in and chat, but we can't have that when we've got dangerous items going on or sensitive work going on. We don't want distractions so that things get missed. So that was another implementation of our SMS process where we had the injury report, hazardous, the incident report, and then this is kind of what we did. And the maintenance team came together and determined this would be the best way to take care of this at this point. We're hoping for a bigger, better facility that we can really mitigate some of these risks with how people enter our facility, and that's down the road. Some of our challenges, considerations, management buy-in, that has not been our problem. Our management, our owner, initiated this, and he's putting his money where his mouth is. He's paid me to do it, and he's also our DO, so our director of ops, and he's a pilot for us, and he's the first one to, hey, I did this, writes up a report, I busted an altitude, so he owns it, and he is our example from the top down. So that to me is a true blessing that we have that. Company personnel buy-in, this, it depends on from person to person. I think the buy-in comes when they start to see the benefits of the program. So we give examples of where they see things happening that will that help us change because of hazards that come up or incidents that we have. And the personnel can say, okay, I see how we fix that. This is working. And I've seen some of that. Ease of reporting. I'm finding this is one of my next big projects is you've got to make reporting as simple as possible. So that's my next big project is the reporting process. If I have something that happened or I want somebody to make a report, we're trying to, QR. Next thing we're rolling out. Following, and I think another thing is important is not just get the report and they get lost in the black hole of the SMS team, but I put alerts on my calendar. I always send follow-up reports. I talk to the people. We're a small enough company. I go up to them and I talk to them. Hey, how do you think our mitigation's working? Are you satisfied with it? Because they're the initiator of the report. And I want to make sure that what we're doing is something that they see as a good mitigation because they were intimately a part of that situation if they reported it. One of the challenges, and this is my challenge, is a director of safety that wears a lot of hats because I'm a PC-12 captain, director of safety, and I also work in a maintenance shop. I'm an AMPIA, so I help out when I can. That's not as much, but that's for me to be disciplined about my time. And in smaller organizations, this is what's going to happen. You're going to do probably more than one thing. And so being very disciplined with time and projects and just sometimes I have to just lean into things and get them done. So, and also on the safety side of it, not overdoing it. I don't want to be unsafe in my flight operations. Helpful qualifications. I just thought we'd put this in here that there's from a practical side, what are some things to look for in someone especially as your company grows? Enthusiasm regarding a safety culture. And obviously that goes without saying, but also on the other side, we definitely don't want the, to be like, oh, geez, the safety guy's here. So flight charter operations experience is always good. That just so you know what's going on and what pilots are dealing with. If you have somebody that has maintenance operations experience, that's helpful as well. So you know what's going on in the shop, especially if you're implementing it across a maintenance situation. Somebody who's able to teach and present, that's not afraid to talk to people about things. That's a good thing as well. Somebody that can write manuals, do curriculum writing. If that's a skill they have, that's a valuable skill. And developing training material and being able to get it across to the employees. Just a couple things I thought of offhand. That's the basis of what I wanted to share. So, just figured we'd leave it at that. If you have other questions, I think we're at that point.
You bet. Thank you, Captain Hatfield, for your presentation and discussion there. I'd like to go ahead and ask Captain Berman to come on up now, and I'm going to ask each of you a question, and then we'll keep moving on with the with the time frame. So, Captain Berman, I see you're up there. I got a question for you. You talked about training. You had a lot of part-time pilots. You're bringing in, you're growing. You're bringing in more people. What are you doing for training for not just your pilots, but I think you talked about that you have some other employees out there. What kind of training are you doing for them on their roles and responsibility as it comes to safety within your organization?
Thank you. Good question. The other main functional areas that we would have would be maintenance and handling passengers and other, ground operation duties, and people who kind of handle the timing of the flights and things like that. So for the maintenance functions, this is an area we need to build out. We only have one maintenance employee, the director of maintenance, and so she's part of the SMS process. Her functional area is part of it. Her work is under the general operations manual. We don't have a separate maintenance manual in accordance with being a small operator, so that fits neatly in. Many of the audit areas are maintenance related. So, for example, we with the aircraft types that we operate, we get a lot of data from an internal bus on the aircraft that we're able to download, particularly relating to our engine trend monitoring program. And we've identified some safety issues. We've identified some engine issues over time that we've had to deal with. So she has led on that. And then we also, in a payoff for our safety program, have identified some things that have saved wear on engines and have saved money and made operations more reliable. That were particularly involving some of the things our pilots were doing handling the airplane when we first got them years and years ago. So that's what's happening in maintenance. As far as the ops people who pull the airplanes out and get them ready for flight and then tell us where to go and when to go, they've always been part of the family, and so they take part in all of our discussions and meetings. They do get trained explicitly on their flight following functions, and so the audit extends to them. I do that. I call them up and say, "Where's this airplane now? What time's it going to get there?" And so we test the system. So yeah, we do extend it to those areas, but we need to do more.
Great, thank you for that. And Captain Hatfield, you talked about using a third-party company to help you assist in running the SMS, and you talked a little bit about what you used them for, setting up manuals and stuff like that. Have you run into any? Can you tell us about maybe some pros and cons of using a third party to help you get your SMS off the ground, or is there, what? Yeah,
they've been very helpful for us because they've been very knowledgeable, and when I have a question, they're available. They are. They've been doing it a lot longer than I have, so it's just having that wealth of knowledge that. We're paying them already, and I'm not concerned about, am I going to be like getting charged for every 6 minutes? I can call them anytime. It's kind of like the phone a friend of SMS for us. And we use them quite a bit. They're a part of our meetings right now. And slowly we'll probably take a lot more of that in-house. But the big thing for us was just the initial getting the foundation of the manuals. That's a big step that I think is very daunting for some people, and having somebody to assist with that's an expert in that is key.
Okay. And did you find that they were useful in getting the manuals up and running? And
absolutely.
Was it material that was useful and not just overkill or things that you couldn't sustain, as our FAA spokesperson said?
No, it's very sustainable. I think then what it takes now is it takes me being able to then implement that. So I have a framework in which to implement, and it's very practical in the way that it does, but it does have us, okay, we need to go back. It's, one of the 4 pillars. It enables us to go back, and this is why we're doing this. And then we put it through the process. And if we need to make a manual change, then we make a manual change. We'll put that. We have a list of things like that, this is not going to work as well as we thought. We're gonna make an adjustment here for next time we get an approval, because we're still in the voluntary stage. It's not an officially approved manual yet.
Excellent. Okay, well, thank you for that. I think we're going to move on right now. So we will come back to you later in the whole panel there for more questions, especially from our audience. And that's a reminder to our audience to go ahead. If you have questions specifically or in general for everybody, please go ahead and put those in the chat box, and Aaron will pick those up and read them off for us later when there's time. So at this point, we'll go ahead and proceed to our second group of operators. The operators in this group have fully implemented an SMS and integrated it within their operation. We'll hear about lessons they've learned and advice they have for other small and mid-sized operators. From this group, we have, for the first one we'll have is Sean Mulholland, Director of Safety for 7-Bar Aviation. So Sean, at this point, you can go ahead and share your screen and you have the controls.
All right. Thank you, Member Graham. Audio and video check. Everything visible?
Looks good. Yep. Go ahead and share your screen.
All right. Sharing my screen. All right. All right. Very good. Okay. Thank you very much, Member Graham, and also to everyone else, including the other presenters. I think this is a great opportunity for us to share our experience with the rest of the industry. First, I'd like to talk a little bit about 7-Bar Aviation. We've been around for a while. We have a 75-year legacy in the aviation industry. We were established in 1947. Spanning over 7 decades with a rich history of in the aviation industry. Over the course of that time, we've been involved. So we started as a family concern, did FBO work, did aircraft sales, charter, instruction, virtually ran the gambit on general aviation activity. But eventually, we kind of learned we wanted to focus on the air medical community. And we originally started in New Mexico and had a long, successful history with providing services to healthcare organizations, hospitals usually. We run what basically is kind of referred to as a traditional model in our business, where we provide service to the hospital as a vendor. We've since relocated our headquarters to Dallas-Fort Worth area. And over the last 12 years that we've been involved in working on our SMS, we have developed some deep relationships within the industry, with the regulator and other safety stakeholders that have allowed us to become leaders in the safety arena, in spite of being of small size. Our operation, as we stand today, we are currently all emergency medical in the 135 arena. We have operations that involve single-engine helicopters, multi-engine IFR helicopters, turboprops, and turbojet. We have a very diverse fleet. We have 2 Augusta 119s, a couple of different variants of those. One Augusta 119 Echo. That's our IFR platform. We have an E90, a couple of B200s, and a Citation Encore. I kind of think of us as kind of a Swiss Army knife. We've got one of everything that we can use to provide the services that our customers demand. We currently have 3 bases of operation, one up in Virginia, one right here, kind of our home station here in North Texas, and one with several aircraft out in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Past locations have been far-flung across the country. We've had operations in Maine, Massachusetts, South Carolina, Kansas, Tennessee, Oklahoma, and other locations around the state of Texas. We currently have less than 50 employees, so we would certainly still qualify as a small to mid-size operator. And our operation has varied in size from between 5 and 15 aircraft over the last decade. So I think the real message here is that our SMS is truly scalable because it has allowed us to adjust to varying sizes of our organization as changes have come. Our SMS journey within the voluntary program, I look at the start as being around 2011 or so. We were an early adopter of the SMS process. We committed to the FAA's SMS pilot program, which the regulator was working on developing what eventually became Part 5, along with all the other members of the Aeromedical Operators Association, or AMOA. We also, having jet capability and having the capacity to operate within the Americas, we recognized that we needed to have an SMS that is approved by the state according to ICAO requirements. So we signed up for the pilot program for that purpose as well. We also recognized that our customers' needs demanded that we have formalized SMS processes right in their contracts. So it really wasn't something that we could not pursue if we were going to be competitive for those contracts. And at that point, we also had plans for growth, specifically adding rotorcraft to our offerings and looking for opportunities for contracts in new parts of the country that we had never operated before, and having a physical footprint that could potentially go coast to coast. So with all of that, we moved along with the pilot program for a couple of years, and then the organization recognized that with our ambitions that they really needed to have a full-time director of safety. So that position was created, and that's how I came to join the organization. Following year, 2014, we within the pilot program, we achieved level 2, which we partnered with our certificate management team and with AFS 900 to do that. And then soon after that, the final rule and Part 5 was issued. The pilot project was retired, and the SMS voluntary program that exists today was introduced. Then over the next 6 years, we had a lot of change within our organization and within the industry. Obviously, the regulation changed the content of the SMS that we had already created with our implementation plan, challenges with resources at the FAA for validation purposes, and structural changes within our own business in terms of contracts we'd pursued or maybe contracts that we lost over the course of business. So there was a lot of change that kind of delayed our validation. Didn't delay our implementation, but that final piece of validation that was a bit of a challenge. 7-Bar chose to adhere to our implementation plan that we had submitted. We had to make adjustments, of course, as circumstances changed, but we continued to push for the full implementation of the SMS in spite of everything that was going on around us. And further, we enhanced our program with a new SMS portal. We had to change portals because the one that we were working with was not meeting our needs. We implemented a small flight ops quality assurance, or FOQA program, and that covers both fixed wing and rotorcraft operations. And we became a stakeholder in the Aviation Safety Information Analysis and Sharing, or a SIAS program, which has been very helpful for us in terms of data and being able to better assess risk in the environments that we operate in. So moving on to about 2021, thanks to a strong effort from our FAA oversight team at the North Texas FSDO and our own leadership, we were finally able to achieve active conformance within the SMS voluntary program. It was quite an effort for everyone involved, and we obviously had a lot of folks on our team and our partners at the regulator that helped make that possible. So our SMS was designed to systemically integrate the management of safety risk into our daily operations, our business planning, and our overall decision-making processes in order to help us adapt to change and continuously improve. Within the safety policy pillar, we developed our commitment to safety statement signed by our accountable executive that is displayed prominently in all of our bases, all of our operating locations, both in the pilot's lounge and down in the maintenance areas, so folks can recognize that we are committed to this process. We obviously have our SMS manual guiding our procedures and activities. We also have a number of supplemental documents that are kind of part of that suite: emergency response manuals, post-accident incident procedures, or PAPE in our industry, it's often called, and additional documents supporting environmental operations and security. As it relates to safety risk assessment, we have our operational risk assessments, sometimes called the flight risk assessment. It's a requirement in air medical for helicopters to utilize a pre-flight risk assessment tool, but we also utilize the same tools and processes with our fixed wing. We recognize it's a good tool for the rotor, so why are we going to hold it back from fixed wing? We also have organizational risk assessments and change management processes for new and changed systems, a new or a modified operation like a location or a new aircraft, ineffective risk controls and new hazard identification and evaluation, and key changes to our personnel. Related to safety assurance, obviously we have a reporting system that's part of that portal that I mentioned. That same system also houses our internal evaluation program audits, which covers systemic audits as well as individual base audits, employee safety, and other aspects of programs that we measure. We also have quality assurance audits that come through that same process, largely focused on the maintenance operation and facilities. We also get data from external audits, like the Commission for Air Medical Transport Standards, CAMES, that is common in our industry. FAA surveillance, every time the FAA comes in to look us over, that's free data. I'll take that any day. And then occasionally our customers even will hire a third party to come in and audit us as part of their due diligence in their contracting processes. We also do audits on some of our vendors, training vendors, maintenance, and so forth, to gather data or to follow up on events where maybe there was a quality escape along the way. And of course, our flight ops quality assurance program to provide that real-time measure for what's actually happening in the operation in terms of compliance and procedures. Safety promotion, we utilize a monthly safety meeting at each base. I often provide content for that. And I also have a base safety manager at each base that helps handle local issues. We provide training. Every employee, regardless of their role, gets a safety indoc where they learn about our SMS, they learn about how we apply the concepts of just culture in our organization, and they learn to use the SMS portal. And we also have a follow-up learning management system recurrent training requirement, where we cover, kind of rehash what we have in place, and we introduce information about what has changed in the SMS over the last year. We have a base safety activity report. That's a report that I ask my local base safety managers to produce each month to talk about what's going on locally, issues that they face, their interaction with our customer in terms of safety, and also an opportunity for them to share kudos for things that are going well, where we can share some recognition for our employees. And a safety bulletin process where we have the opportunity to push critical safety information out in a timely manner that can be tracked and trended in terms of whether or not it's been consumed or not. Some unique aspects and achievements of our SMS. I think our FAA validation is paramount among those. The last count that I had, and Mr. Whitmore, I know you're here on the call, you probably can give a more accurate number. The last number that I had heard was there were around 40 certificates in the 135 arena that had completed their validation. Given that there are nearly 1,500 certificates out there, we're in that 2% club. I think that speaks very well to what we've done. Our commitment to safety statement, interestingly enough, during our pilot project initial review, the AFS 900 team took various documents back to Washington to discuss. And I did receive a call back from the then head of the program office asking if he could incorporate 7-Bar Aviation's commitment to safety statement into the FAA's training materials. I thought that was a great example of, even though we're a small operator, being able to demonstrate world-class performance in that the entire agency was going to be trained and go evaluate all your 121s and 135s and everyone else based on a standard from a small operator like ourselves. Our operational risk assessments, we recognize the need to expand that process to include our mechanics. Mechanics are subject to a lot of the same human factor issues that our pilots face. And given that that's an effective tool in the flight arena, we felt it was a good tool in the maintenance arena, and it has proven to be so. Our flight operations quality assurance program for both fixed and rotor, pretty uncommon in a small operator. We think it's got great value because we recognize that being a small operator, we may not have eyes and ears everywhere. But this tool allows us to leverage technology and data in order to better monitor our operation and ensure that we're operating consistent with our values. We have helped to champion the creation of a space for rotorcraft within the ESIAS program. When we first signed up to become a stakeholder with ESIAS, I wanted to bring all of our data to the organization, but I was surprised to find that there was no capacity for the ESIAS program to take in anything rotorcraft related. So with lobbying efforts in partnership with the Air Medical Operators Association and getting in front of the right people, we've lobbied to have that space created. So we're very proud to have been part of that effort. And then our outputs from our SMS, we've had the opportunity to present at the Aviation Safety InfoShare Conference, which I think is a great testament to what a small operator can do and operating on that very large stage with operators from across the NAS. Challenges that we encountered. Well, there are some administrative requirements. It's required us to keep our manuals up to date, keep our forms up to date, and that's a little bit of work. Won't lie about that. We've, like anybody else, we've had that crusty employee occasionally, the folks that push back. We've had the flavor of the month mindset. Somebody would say, "This too shall pass," and I'll just keep going on doing as I do. We've had instances of kind of incorrect usage of the SMS. Say, for example, somebody's had a chronic IT problem. All of a sudden it becomes a safety problem. We've had to redirect folks along the way at times. Personality conflicts and such that maybe are better suited for an HR discussion rather than a safety discussion. So education and redirection have been required. Maintaining process discipline. You've had to be disciplined in order to feed the beast, if you will. And then, of course, regulator resources, not so much as it relates to the implementation. The tools and processes there have been excellent, but more in the validation piece where we're struggling to get enough attention on that at a given point. Examples of some issues identified and mitigated. As it relates to risk assessment and change management, we've identified issues related to airfields that in remote areas that perhaps have had some pavement issues or lighting systems issues that have been identified, trended, and given us the opportunity to make changes of when and where we operate and to engage those facilities directly. Creation of new controls for maintenance checks. Some checks were sometimes just rote or not completed with certain structure, say pressurization systems and different things like that. So we identified some issues there and built checklists to control hazards in that area. We identified and resolved self-induced or external pressure to fly concerns. We've had identified chronic mechanical issues with aircraft related to the quality of a new aircraft or a lack of reliability of certain components. Those issues we were able to discuss openly and address them for everyone to see. In safety assurance, we've identified improper maintenance and record-keeping errors events through our quality audits and such that have allowed us to retool our processes and eliminate hazards in that arena. And identified pilot operational deficiencies, primarily through our FOCA program, which is addressed through individual engagement and globally through quarterly training and checking processes. So that was something of a mouthful. So I will defer back to you, Member Graham, and thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Sean. I appreciate your presentation. Next up, we will hear, you can go ahead and unshare your presentation. We will hear from Boston Medflight. Representing Boston Medflight is Rick Klein, Chief Operating Officer, and Mark Honorato, Director of Aviation Operations. So, gentlemen, you can go ahead and share your screen, and you have the controls.
Thank you, Director Graham, or Member Graham. I really appreciate the opportunity for Boston Medflight to participate in this wonderful event today. If I can share my screen. Right. Again, thank you very much for the opportunity for Boston Medflight to participate in this SMS discussion today. A little bit about Boston Medflight before we get started here. So Boston Medflight is a small operator. We are unique in our industry, in the air ambulance industry, in that we are a nonprofit 501c3. We were one of the first air ambulance operators in the United States, beginning back in 1984, and we were created by as a consortium of hospitals, academic medical centers here in the Eastern Massachusetts in the Boston area. We operate both ground critical care as well as air critical care, both in the helicopters and, as you can see there, in our jet aircraft as well. Primarily regionally here in the New England area, but we also service patients from the east of the Mississippi. We pride ourselves on providing the highest level of clinical care with the experienced medical practitioners that we have who work for us, as well as the highest level of pilot expertise and emergency medical technicians who operate our ground vehicles as well. We fly the newest equipment. We make sure that our crews, whether clinical or aviation, receive the best training possible. But we operate as a low overhead. As a nonprofit, we pride ourselves on having low overhead and devoting our funds available to our personnel and our equipment and our training to make sure that we provide the best service to our patients. So why an SMS program for Boston Medflight? As you'll see in just a moment when I go through the chronology, we identified that there was a need Boston Med Flight has long had a very strong safety culture. We wanted to assure that we could maintain that strong safety culture as the company grew and progressed. We had a strong desire to have a comprehensive safety program that engaged all employees. As I mentioned, our business lines include ground transport. We have our own aviation maintenance department, our own pilot group. We have a significant administrative group as well as facilities management. We wanted a safety program that could cross all the business lines and not be purely a aviation-related safety program. As a small operator, we lack the significant resources for overhead, for administrative overhead that is involved in a lot of safety programs. So we were looking for something that would engage all of our employees, maintain our safety culture, and did not require significant overhead. The solution for us was a safety management system. So one of the drivers for this change to develop a safety management system for Boston Med Flight was our achievement of our Part 135 Air Carrier Certificate in 2017. Prior to that, we had been a vendor model program with various fixed wing and rotor wing vendors providing our aviation services. In 2017, when we decided to go on our own with our own Part 135, we said we need to have a strong safety culture that continues on now that we have our own air carrier certificate. So in 2019, as was mentioned earlier, we brought in an outside analyst to do a safety gap analysis for us, to give us a perspective on where we were and where we wanted to be. That gap analysis looked at us and said, you need to initiate a safety management system, and the FAA's voluntary program seems to fit you in that you can do it with the overhead that you have available and has very clear direction through Part 5 and through the AC that had been published at the time. We then went about drafting our SMS manual and putting all the pieces in place. And then we hit a major slowdown, and that was what we all know as the COVID pandemic. During that year period, although we had just started off on the SMS VP, we were put in queue, and we had a dramatic slowdown in our progress in implementing our SMS VP. Towards the end of the COVID pandemic, we said, we need to move forward with this safety management system, whether or not we are on track with the SMS VP. And so we continued on the process. At first looking at developing an SMS software program that worked for our company. We looked at several different vendors and selected the Baldwin Safety and Compliance SMS hazard reporting system. And in October 2021, we went live for Boston Med Flight with our SMS program. Again, we continued on the SMS VP track with submitting our SMS manual, which is now with the FAA, to continue on to receive that certification. However, as was mentioned a couple times now, with the notice of proposed rulemaking for Part 135 operators, our SMS VP is somewhat on hold, but nonetheless, our SMS program is fully in flight and fully active in our company. And now, Mark Honorato will give you some examples of some of the successes we've had with our SMS program.
Thank you, Rick. When we first looked at the SMS voluntary program, it seemed like a daunting task. So in order to efficiently move through the system, we said we have to do two parallel tracks. Number one, we have to continue administratively working with the FAA to check all the blocks which were the SMS voluntary program, all the while identifying and mitigating hazards that were presented with new challenges as we were faced with the pandemic and the changes with the SMS voluntary program. So as a foundation, we use the Part 5 guidance that was given. We use the advisory circular, and we crafted a method where we'd use the proactive, reactive, and predictive models to help us identify hazards. So the first example we have, as we just get the slide deck moved here, is the proactive approach. During the COVID epidemic, we noticed that the clinicians during our overwater flight, and we do service islands off the coast of Massachusetts, wanted to wear their personal protective equipment over their flotation devices. This saved decontamination process. At first glance, we said, no, you can't have anything over the flotation device. It's your last line of defense should the aircraft have an unexpected water landing. We were fortunate enough to have right down the street Survival Systems Incorporated in a pool and a helicopter underwater egress training device. So we leveraged that pool and that training device to establish a criteria for personal protective equipment over our flotation devices. As it turns out, after some 21 helicopter egress evolutions in the pool, the personal protective equipment that we chose did not impact either the efficiency of the flotation device or deployment of that flotation device. And we kept that policy in place. In terms of reactive, we're like all organizations, we do occasionally have a hangar rash. We had one particular case where at one of our bases, we had some rotor blade damage pulling an aircraft into the hangar. In that reactive look back on why we had the helicopter damage, we used a root cause analysis tool to determine why we got that rotor blade damage and what controls that were in effect we deviated from as a normal part of our duty. We did a comprehensive root cause analysis on that, and we put more efficient, better control measures in to prevent the next hangar rash incident from happening. And then we move on to the predictive. We have significant amounts of change within Boston Medflight, both standing up our fixed wing program. We have several construction projects going on where we're rebuilding hangars and airports have construction. So as we look forward and how we manage that change is we do a look ahead to say, what can we do to prevent an accident from happening by putting control measures in place with a new hazard that's been identified. So you can see on the left side of the screen here, we have a hangar that we used as a temporary hangar. And when we did a fit test to make sure that our ground vehicle and our helicopter fit in, we said, okay, it does fit and we have plenty of room, but what hazards are we confronting and how do we mitigate those hazards? So in order to keep the helicopter, again, from running into anything or damaging property or people, you can see on the right side, we put control measures in place. We put mats down on the floor, and those mats are raised up about 1/2 inch, which prevent our tug, which is under the helicopter, from maneuvering outside of the protected space. We also have a lineup line on the midsection of our helicopter, a lineup line on the midsection of the tug, and a lineup line on the floor so that if we follow those control measures, the helicopter won't contact anything. So we do these things in accordance. In addition, we have a FOPA as we look back to look forward. We have other change management, hazard identification, and using our SMS software suite, we prevent stovepipes as we mitigate those risks. I'd be happy to take any questions now or hand it back to you, Member Graham.
Thank you, Mark. We're going ahead and we'll get some questions here in a little bit. So you go ahead and unshare your presentation. And next presentation you'll hear from is from Maria Kelly, Vice President of Safety and a DER with Jet Access. So I see you're coming up. You can go ahead and share your screen. The webinar is yours.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Mic check good?
Sounds good.
Thank you for the warm introduction, Member Graham. So as stated before, my name is Maria Kelly. I'm the Vice President of Safety and DER at Jet Access. Just a little bit of background regarding our organization. So Jet Access operates under one brand. It's on a national scale. We provide a full suite of aviation services that include charter, aircraft management. We've got 3 repair stations. We do FBO and airport management, sales and acquisitions, as well as flight training. We partner with 4 different universities, and we actually have a flow-through program to our charter division as well, with principal operating bases in New York, Indiana, and Florida. So in this session, I'm mainly going to focus on our charter operation, which we are fully SMS active conformant with. We have a number of programs and safety initiatives that we participate in, including our hazard reporting program, ASAP and MSAP, of which we are stakeholders and contributors to ASIAS. We have an internal evaluation program, an external evaluation program, an active emergency response plan, as well as VDRP and CAS. So the big question that is on everybody's mind is, where do we even start to begin an SMS? How do we comply with this rulemaking? Or if we do have an SMS in place, where do we go to get formally recognized? We know that there's the NPRM, there's guidance in the advisory circular, as well as the 8900. But what is the practical guide? So in a nutshell, along with the resources that are available to us, I just wanted to go through the quick 1, 2, 3 steps of how to actually do it. The first step starts with the submission of your letter of intent to your certificate management team. That kind of gives them a heads up of what you want to do and how you want to do it. They'll provide you some materials to start the process that include like a schedule of events, as well as a compliance tracker, and maybe even some job aids. And so then you're going to go ahead and do the work. So after you submit these items back to your certificate management team, they're going to review your schedule of events as well as your compliance statement. And it's really going to kind of depend on your organization's timeline as far as the implementation plan goes, as well as your certificate management team's timeline. Implementation can be 90 days or it can be 365 days, depending on your workload. And I believe that we've got 24 months from the final rulemaking in order to have a fully implemented SMS, which is currently in the NPRM. And so the basic thing to take away from that is to set reasonable expectations within your organization and with your certificate management team. So from there, they're going to conduct design validations, which basically consists of a review of your SMS manual for all references that are being used in your self-assessment. So this can be done through your self-assessment through your internal evaluation program or through the gap analysis. Your internal evaluation program can also help you identify existing gaps in different aspects of your company, whether it's in maintenance or if it's in training or your flight operations or in your method of record keeping. Its primary purpose is to make sure that your SMS processes are adequately documented. So then your certificate management team is going to conduct your design demonstrations, which is more of a show and tell type forum that demonstrates your SMS processes are implemented. So it's really your opportunity to walk them through how your SMS process works, what systems you use, and show proof of your compliance efforts. If you're not necessarily new to SMS, you may have a process that is documented but not implemented very well, or you could have a process that is implemented but not documented. And so Part 5 does provide the guidance to bridge the gap between the two. And then step 3 is the last step. It results in your SMS acceptance letter with the NPRM. So when you submit your statement of compliance, it now puts you in a regulated environment to maintain your SMS in accordance with Part 5. And so when you complete your design validations and demonstrations, you'll receive your acceptance letter. Your SMS manual does become an accepted manual. And so it's important to note that your emergency response plan, it is an aspect of your SMS, but that document is supplementary unless you are operating on a combined manual. Your ERP is not an accepted manual, so you can continue to use it as a living, breathing document. You don't have to wait for approval for emergency revisions. And looking forward, all of your compliance monitoring is going to be accomplished through your DCTs, the same way that your flight operations and maintenance DCTs are currently completed with your certificate management team. But having a great program isn't without its setbacks. There are many issues that can cause delays in trying to achieve your active conformance status, such as workload on the organization. I know that we began our SMS journey in March of 2019, and we became fully conformant in September of 21. We experienced nearly a year-long delay due to COVID and the scheduling of design validations and demonstrations with our certificate management team, as well as with AFS 900, because this was being done at a time where we were not able to complete them virtually. So all of the work was done, but as soon as we were ready to complete those validations, everything went on lockdown for COVID. So another hurdle could also be your certificate management team's unfamiliarity with the conformance process. But there's good news to make sure that your certificate management team can get on board. If they need help or if they don't know where to start, have them reach out to AFS 900. There's a team dedicated to SMS outreach that can conduct your informational sessions with your certificate management team. They can also invite you, the operator, to those sessions if necessary. When it comes to scheduling conflicts, what I can say is definitely do not get discouraged. If you're looking at a 90-day implementation, just be flexible with your certificate management team, as well as communicating delays with your leadership team. So as stated earlier with AFS 900, I do think that there are around 40 operators that do have fully active conformance status, and either 1,500 or 2,000 different certificates, all trying to achieve the same goal. So that can backlog the system. And so my advice to operators that are just looking into this is to try and get ahead as much as you can. And when you're doing your self-assessment, that findings are not a bad thing. They're actually a really great way to exercise your change management and your risk assessment tool to determine your root cause, to come up with corrective actions, as well as monitor with your assurance checks to make sure, hey, the thing that we said that we're doing is what we're actually doing and it's working, versus simply conforming to the standard. Now, there may be delays and setbacks, but honestly, that's just your SMS in action, live, just trying to get through this process. So if you're brand new to SMS, there are several products that are available from industry leaders that can help you document your process. I know that some organizations that I've been involved with in the past, as well as currently, it can include like Air Charter Safety Foundation, the Safety Management International Collaboration Group, there's Omni SMS, HAI, and your SMS documentation can be as simple or as complex as your operation needs it to be, and you can always scale it up with a software when that's required. If you're a smaller operation where maybe your director of safety is a shared role, your hazard reporting program can be done through like SurveyMonkey, papers, in the suggestion box, Google Forms or Microsoft Excel. Your risk tolerability and assurance checks dates can all be also on the same form. You can put calendar reminders to make sure that you follow up on corrective actions and you document them through that process. If you are more of a medium or even some larger scale operators, it might be time to look into a safety software. Some that I've used in the past can include, Prism, Vocus, WBAT. There's also Pro Safety, as well as Baldwin and QuickBaits. And then another really big question that's kind of on everybody's mind is, okay, well, how much is this going to cost me? Having a dedicated aviation safety software may not actually cost you anything. There are some insurance carriers out there that offer like a performance vector. It's where they will give you an annual credit or a stipend or services for SMS management, as well as an evaluation tool. For instance, with USAIG, they offer a performance vector. With Global Aerospace, they offer an SM4, which is what it's called. And so what that can do is provide you an opportunity to shop with your insurance carriers and leverage that relationship with them in order to prevent loss. And again, this is not an exhaustive list. This is just something that I've experienced with, and I've had the honor and privilege to work with some of these organizations and in some of these programs. And so what we've learned through NTSB accident investigations and using SMS, our organization has been able to work through overcoming a fear-based safety culture, especially with all the different and unique backgrounds that aviation has. Having the opportunity to walk the walk and sharing of success stories, and taking the time to ensure that employees and leadership are heard and that we follow up on those corrective actions that are also going to help with your buy-in of the safety program. We also want to identify areas of, pre-flight risk. And I do that by measuring new or changed items and reviewing our FRET regularly. Not being afraid to raise your hand for no-go operations. A good example of that is I would not send a crew into Aspen if it was a brand new pairing. Perhaps, aircraft time and type experience may be an issue. Aircraft is heavy, it's during poor weather conditions, and they are scheduled on a max duty day or they become delayed. All of these things are compounding factors. And so having that tool in order to alert your flight crew, hey, these are some compounding factors, and either it will score it as a no-go operation or it will become escalated. So we will push the stop button for the no-go operation. When it comes to dealing with blurred lines of authority, some operators may experience an issue where, the certificate holder has operational control, but the pilots may feel pressure to perform or pressure to do what the owner says because that's the individual that signs their paycheck. This could also flow into things such as ensuring that your pilot uniform and brand cohesiveness aligns with the operator that's conducting that flight, or operators that conduct supplemental lift operations as to who is conducting that flight. Maybe an aircraft is coming to you from a different management company or an operator, and the branding does get removed during the conformity process. That can cause ambiguity into who's operating the flight. Then there's lack of awareness about the existence or prevalence or severity of safety hazards. Say there may have been an event that activated your emergency response plan. You had some corrective action that resulted in a policy or procedure change. And so ensuring that there is system awareness of what that hazard was, what that change was made, why it was made, and who it affects. Especially if something almost happens, you can utilize the SMS to capture those safety occurrences, to determine root cause, and learn from that event to prevent an actual occurrence or the bad thing from happening. And if that risk control doesn't work, it's okay to go back to the drawing board. We're not the all-knowing, all-being, all-seeing, and sometimes you get it wrong, and that's okay. That's the beauty of SMS, is going back to that corrective action and the mindset to offer a unique perspective to seek safety opportunities that are affecting other areas throughout your organization. And again, thank you for allowing me to present today. I hope that I can continue to be of service to the industry, as well as when we work all towards the same goal together. And I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Maria, for your presentation and your insight into implementing an SMS with all the examples and ideas. I appreciate that. Next, we're going to move on to Eric Hamp. He's the Director of Operations for Blue Hawaiian Helicopters. And as you come up, Eric, you can go ahead and share your screen, and you have the controls.
Okay, yeah, thanks very much for, like everybody else said, for letting me be here to talk through this. Thanks everybody who's called in to listen, and here we go. So Blue Hawaiian Helicopters, we operate in Hawaii, of all places, which is a lot of fun. Size and scope of our operation, we've got 6 bases across the Hawaiian Islands. Hawaii Island, we got Hilo and Waikoloa, Maui, we've got Kahului, Oahu, we've got Honolulu, Kauai, we've got Lihue and Princeville, and then we're a Part 135 certificate. We operate currently 22 EC-130s. We do have an A-star left, but it's on its way out probably. 120 employees roughly. We went through, we started in the pilot program as mentioned earlier, and then we eventually had to shift over to the voluntary program, but we went through it and we got the acceptance in 2015, and we've been working under it ever since. We do have a dedicated director of safety, and that was actually pivotal to getting the thing across the finish line originally. I think size of the organization is really the key to this. Is if you're smaller, probably the director of safety can be, somebody who's doing other jobs. But for us, it was difficult to get it across the finish line based on our size until we actually dedicated somebody to it. But once that was done, and that was me at the time, I've since moved on to director of operations. The 4 parts of an SMS, we have policy, safety, risk management, safety assurance, safety promotion. And most people have heard of all of these, and maybe they've played around with them a little bit, but we've really just tried to, get beyond just the manual and get really into, just the functioning of it all. And that was really a difficult task. But what I thought I would do just to kind of illustrate all of this to you is, paying attention, is just to kind of talk through one of the biggest challenges of flying in Hawaii. The biggest risks here for us, really, the biggest risk is weather for us. It moves really fast. It moves really quickly. We primarily operate tours, so we're out in it. What people want to see typically tends to be, not typically, it's always where the weather is. They want to go to the windward side to see waterfalls and valleys, and that's where the weather is. So if you look at what's caused accidents in Hawaii in tourism flying, it's been inadvertent IMC primarily, followed only shortly behind by maintenance issues. So, and just to kind of illustrate, I want to use that example of how we've addressed inadvertent IMC to kind of show how the different portions of SMS kind of work together. They're not separated out. They all work together at the same time. So we started getting reports over the years, safety reports and aircraft monitoring reports, which is really part of your safety assurance process, monitoring your operation all the time, which is what reporting is. And we started drawing in data about that type of thing, inadvertent IMC and from the aircraft, we could even see instances where people got close to the clouds because you could see from high G, low G maneuvers where they had to make a quick maneuver or descend fast, or, maybe even got a little disoriented. So we got that from our safety assurance process. Safety risk management process is where we started digging into, the history of crashes in Hawaii. We did investigation, we did risk management on those types of crashes, on the events that we had that were close to inadvertent IMC, or in fact, we had a really gnarly inadvertent IMC event back in 2000. And so we really used our safety risk management portion of the SMS to dig into that to try to find trends and possible mitigations. Moving along. And then, we dug into inadvertent IMC using the root cause analysis process called a bow tie. Again, part of the safety risk management process, and then implementation of mitigations and barriers that we found through that process, also safety risk management. Continuous review of inadvertent IMC bow tie, and then the changes that we've implemented. That's part of your safety insurance assurance, and then training that we've added based on inadvertent IMC, program promotion, signage, feedback we've gotten, all fits into the promotion portion. So that's just a very specific example of a very significant risk for us, and kind of how we've used the SMS process to get to where we have mitigations in place that we think they're working, but we're going to continue to monitor. There's no end to it in this case. This I just threw up because this was the example of the research that we did to collect data on what were the dangers to Hawaii, Hawaii tourism flying in helicopters. And you can see, in the yellow, these are tourism flights that ended in fatalities, and so many of them are inadvertent IMC. And the reason I put this up is to show not only that, but we did this with an Excel form. And I think that was mentioned in the last presentation, that you can do almost everything you need with Excel without really expensive programs. I was given the task of implementing an SMS under the voluntary program and a risk assessment for a statewide for our pilots, and I was given no budget to do it. And we're a relatively large company. We have, like I said, at the time we had 30 ships and 5 bases, and we were able to do it and get it done without spending big money on a safety program or safety software. It can be done with a minimal cost, really. So that's an important thing to note. Why did we use the bow tie? It allowed us to address things that were nuanced and complicated, like inadvertent IMC. We still recognize, though, that we're still not immune to it. And that's what I'm trying to illustrate here is it's the continuous monitoring of your processes can be a really difficult thing, but that's what it requires. Like, the risks don't just, you mitigate them, but you can't just ignore them. They don't really go away if you don't mitigate. They will creep back in, and if you don't continuously monitor. So anyway, we used this to explore and monitor multiple strategies to try and solve this inadvertent IMC puzzle. And it led to a lot of different mitigations. It was really a puzzle. It was not one thing. It was all kinds of different things that had to be implemented into a big process to address it. And the bow tie helped us to visualize that. And this is just what it ended up looking like. Inadvertent IMC, we have VFR in a flight on a rapidly changing weather day, which is constantly in Hawaii. These are what we identified as causes: weather, poor weather decision-making, overconfidence of the pilot, and complacency. And then if inadvertent IMC happened, these could be the results: crashes with industry, crashes with fatalities, crashes with industry, with injuries, or reputation damage. And then right here is what we put in for barriers. So you can see the bow tie allows you to kind of look at what are your barriers, what are the things that keep the causes from becoming an inadvertent IMC, and if inadvertent IMC happens, what stops it from becoming the results or a crash. And So we utilize that process to really picture all of the mitigations and things that we have in place and what's effective. So you just go through and you then risk assess each one of these using your matrix, and you end up with a pretty good picture of where your holes are. And we have things in there that we haven't yet developed. Like, so you can see the ops control center we're going to develop it's an unknown because we don't have it yet. The autopilot, we haven't really developed how we're going to do that yet, but we're looking at it. And the FAA weather camera is still misleading because it says poor. They are not poor. The FAA weather cameras that have gone up in the state of Hawaii are awesome. It's excellent, but it's not complete yet. There's still some cameras to go up. That's why I have it as orange. So just want to clarify that. Those cameras are awesome. And again, the mitigations that resulted from this, we have a risk assessment worksheet we use for pilots. We call it a draw, a daily risk assessment worksheet. We don't call it a frat. Fatigue management schedule for the pilots, and then a float schedule when it gets really busy. We have a cue-based weather avoidance training that we developed because of this. We call it the LIVE training, which really has to do with avoidance is what it is. Stuff that we're still working on. The weather cameras, like I said, are going in place. That's going to be part of our operational control center, which we're going to work on. That's in accordance with 135.619, which isn't a requirement for us, but we're going to implement it that way. And then, autopilot and a flight coupler, which really would be beneficial for us as far as leveling the aircraft. If you did go in invert an IMC, having the ability to kind of hit a button that allows that levels the aircraft and just helps you to settle things in that critical first portion of an invert an IMC. Some challenges and successes that we've had in implementing our SMS. One of the biggest things has been buy-in from process owner and therefore their team. That we've run into that before. It kind of ebbs and it flows. But if you don't have buy-in, like it was mentioned earlier, from management, that's a problem. But even with the buy-in from management, if you have a process owner that's not into it, it can be very detrimental. And we've definitely had some challenges with that. Safe operations versus revenue generation. That has been a constant challenge. Sometimes it's not even on purpose. It's just you don't realize sometimes as the CEO or whatever that the things you're doing are putting revenue in front of safe operation, or it's pressuring people to do things that we've already shown to be too high of risk. So there has to be a constant watching of that. Is revenue leading to some operational control blurring of the lines of who's doing what and who's making the call? We've had challenges with that for sure. Change management challenge with that is it's just frequent. It's constant. It's getting people to recognize when things are changing, and people are motivated and they're constantly going, hey, all right, we're doing this, we're going to do this. And they forget, hey, there's a change. We got to do safety risk management on it. And, that's a constant frequent thing coming up as things changing. And to make sure that you're running the SRM process on every possible change it's a task, and it has to be monitored. Some successes we've had. We had a lot of success with the FAA program office and participation in training. Program office, I called them before I really knew what was going on back in 2014, 2015. And they came out and saw what we had, found the places we needed to work on. They actually went over to our FSDO and did a bunch of training with them. And then it ran from there. So that was simply just making a call over there. We joke about it sometimes. Maybe they were motivated because we're in Hawaii, but I don't really think so. I get the impression that they're helpful if you call them and ask. That was our experience. They came right over and helped us fill our gaps, trained up our FSDO, and we hit the ground running after that. So that was a success. We created all of this with a small or no budget. I joke about it a lot, but 30 aircraft with 6 bases is all I've ever known. And I sometimes, when I hear people say it would be more difficult for a small operator, I'm just like, any day of the week, give me 3 ships and 1 base. I would be more than happy to do that. And it's not too complicated. Even an operator of that size can generate enough data to mitigate risks and really, really run an effective SMS. So we were a larger operation, and even without a budget, we were really able to do it. I mean, we did spend some money on aircraft systems and some of the programs I asked for that I use, like Bowtie XP, kind of things like that. But we kept the cost pretty minimal, and it is absolutely 100% scalable down to small operators. and it's scaled up to large operators. So we have an FDM program. We haven't gone down the road of FOQA just yet. We've been talking about it, but we do have a flight data management program that we utilize to identify risks. We're part of the ASAP program, which has been really good. Our pilots and mechanics really like that program, and we've generated a lot of good information from it. We've had really effective SMS training, which has led to a lot of company buy-in as far as reporting goes. And that was a challenge at first too, because we operate 7 days a week, all day long. And it was like, well, we can't stop operation to do training. And I was like, okay, well, we'll figure that out. Anyway, what we did was we just implemented a 3-hour training, and we did it like 4 times a day for 2 or 3 days at every base, so everybody could go through it. So there's a way to do it. And that was really a big buy-in for reporting. And then reporting was mentioned in one of the earlier presentations. And I totally agree with this, that the more simple it is, the easier it is for them to report, the more you're going to get. The more you complicate it and add things to it, it just kind of daunts. People get this, they won't do it. And so that's basically it. If there's anything you can take out of what I'm saying, is it's absolutely possible, it's absolutely effective, and it can work for any size of operation. I firmly believe that. So thanks very much.
All right, thank you, Eric, for that presentation and rounding out the group of fantastic presentations and insights. It was great from hearing from all the operators, and I'd like to ask for Sean, Rick, Mark, Maria, and Eric to go ahead and come on up on screen there. There we go. Great. And I want to ask each of you a question to get us started, and then we'll bring in everybody else. Just to let our viewers know, we're probably going to go about 10 minutes over. We're running a little behind, but that's fine. The presentations were so good. So let me start with Sean with 7 bar. You talked about, well, one thing I was amazed. It took you, 10 years to finally get your certificate from the FAA, and you started the pilot program. What were the FAA resource challenges that you encountered while trying to go through the voluntary program, and how did you overcome them?
Well, the challenges were really largely focused on the validation. The actual implementation, the materials, support materials, advisory materials, those were all excellent. We had the roadmap that we needed. Where we struggled was really with boots on the ground at the certificate level. Being a small operator, we don't have a dedicated certificate management team. We have to share our principal inspectors with other certificates. It's sometimes easy to forget, though, that the FAA is also an employer, just like most of us are. As like any other employer, they face the same challenges of finding and retaining people. Their vacancies often result in workload being shared among those who are left. That requires some deliberate trade-offs in what they can and can't support. And we recognize that as a certificate too, when we had the opportunity to choose between conforming an aircraft or bringing a check airman online or validating a voluntary safety program. Obviously, we choose those that is going to affect a continuous operation. So we accepted that. We pushed forward with our implementation, recognizing that at some point in the future, the regulator would have the right resources in the right place at the right time, and that we would have ample evidence of a fully functional SMS. And that's ultimately how things turned out.
Great. Thank you for that, Sean. I know a lot of people are interested in the FAA's SMS voluntary program. Let me jump to Boston MedFlight now. Rick and Mark, you discussed during your implementation that you started with a strong safety culture, and you wanted to maintain that as you implemented the SMS. At the NTSB, unfortunately, when we go to an accident site, we end up eventually through our investigations finding out that, well, one, everybody has a safety culture. It may not be a positive safety culture. A lot of times it's negative, punitive. I think we even described one as toxic once. But you said you had a strong safety culture, a positive one. How was that established, and what is one of the tenets of a strong safety culture?
yours.
Well, thank you very much, Member Graham. We did have a strong safety culture, and I think through the years, Boston Medflight developed that because it started as a small, almost single helicopter family type business. And then as it evolved through strong leadership, that safety culture was maintained throughout the growth of the program as the program grew. What we found is challenging is that as each service line grew and developed over time, that they had exceptional safety culture and records, but they were a little bit stovepiped. So the formal process of having the SMS software suite help us and bringing the SMS program under one umbrella, if you will, really served us well. And it was easy to get buy-in because each service line had a strong safety culture. The adjustment was bringing those safety cultures under one roof and adopting new processes for that safety.
If I could just add to that, one element was in our gap analysis, which we did before we embarked on our SMS process. One of the things that our auditor determined was we had a very strong reporting culture. However, because we had been a legacy vendor-operated program, the reporting culture was based around the clinical side of our organization. So the hazard reporting system that we had was very much a clinical-based reporting system where it was a two-way conversation because of HIPAA between the clinician and the supervisor or the safety manager. We wanted a more holistic reporting system that allowed a group discussion whenever a safety report, a hazard was reported. And that was part of what Mark mentioned of having a holistic program that went across business lines. And that was identified during our gap analysis.
Excellent. Thank you for that. I appreciate that. Next up, I'd like to ask Maria with Jet Access a question. You mentioned the challenge of overcoming fear-based safety culture. Can you describe in more detail what you mean by that, and more importantly, how you overcame that in your operation, or have you yet?
Yes, actually. So there have been a lot of changes with mergers and acquisitions. Jet Access has seen this, period of, very sustained growth over a period of time. And so when you're combining multiple entities that come from, different cultures and different backgrounds and areas of the country, and overall a different way of operating, it can result in a lot of, changes to leadership as well as the reporting structures that they have historically been used to. So if you have a fear-based safety culture, if you identify a fear-based safety culture, it's going to take some time to get everyone's buy-in. I have found that the most effective method that I have received buy-in is the dissemination of lessons learned from previous events, sharing of the relevant stories of SMS success and different successes. Make it part of your, safety training and onboarding process. And also that it comes from a trusted voice. Sometimes the loudest voice in the room doesn't come from your leadership, but it comes from your line employees. And so with also the backup from leadership. So not only are we talking about it and your safety representative is the one that's talking about it, but it is being backed up by your leadership team. Sometimes that does result in changes to safety authority, as well as the existing reporting structure. Also the development of a peer reporting culture that you have a gatekeeper on. Unfortunately, in some of the worst case scenarios, it does result in parting ways because ultimately we're not going to compromise safety program for any reason. So we can try to overcome a fear-based safety culture. I really hope to see at some point in my career where nobody is coming from a fear-based safety culture and we can all, work off of the same sheet of music together.
Thank you, Maria. I appreciate that. All right, Eric with Blue Hawaiian, I got a question for you here. Unfortunately, you've showed the number of accidents in air tour operations over in Hawaii, and we see it in Alaska also as the inadvertent IMC. And I'm just curious, how has your SMS helped you with strategies for combating inadvertent IMC? And what kind of training are you doing to combat the inadvertent IMC with your crews?
Well, firstly, what the SMS did was it it kind of prompted us to investigate and really put some numbers on it, because it always kind of been like inadvertent IMC is the thing. And it was like, okay, well, how prominent is it? Where does it happen? And then why does it happen? So the first thing it did was it just kind of prompted us to go get all that data and look at all the numbers and go, okay, yeah, this is massive. It's happening every island. It's not just one specific place. It was, kind of a statewide thing. So that was the first thing. The next thing was it led to kind of like when we dug into like, okay, what are we doing about it? What have people done about it in the past? It really painted kind of a piecemeal picture of like, well, we did this and we did this, and one company did this, and another company did this. And so there was all these mitigations in place that people kind of tried to find like a silver bullet for it, so to speak, like just like one thing. And inadvertent IMC is so nuanced, and it's just so easy to get into here all over the place. And so what we decided was we need a much more comprehensive picture of this thing, and recognize that like it's not going to just be one thing. There's equipment, there's training, there's culture around it. And so that when we were looking at the root cause analysis for that and kind of how to dig in and create around that, that's where we stumbled upon, not really stumbled upon, but that's where we moved into, okay, let's try the bow tie. I think this is going to work for this. And that's ultimately what it did, is it painted a picture that you could kind of wrap your brain around of what the issues are and what the mitigations are and where the weaknesses are. And what we found to be the biggest weakness was just the decision making of the pilots, and deciding to continue into, really poor weather based on, I've gone that way a million times, or I've seen this before, or whatever it was, or pressure from management to get it done, or pressure to get paid. Like, I don't get paid unless I do the flight kind of thing. So that led to a lot of changes. It changed the way that we schedule. It changed the way that we pay the pilots. It changed the way that we approach weather. But it led to a pretty significant training that we call LIV, which is Leave Identifiable Visual Exits. And what it was trying to do, it was like a cue-based training, but also an avoidance training. So the purpose of it was, don't even go close. Like, as soon as you're starting to question it, you're at what we call a LIV point. And when you're at that point, start to recognize it's time to turn around. It's time to turn around. It's time to find an alternative route. And you do that early. You don't just keep poking in until it's too late and it's closed in behind you, which is what can happen here if you go too deep into a valley. So that philosophy is where we've gone with it, and that's what we teach now constantly, continuously. And it's been a difficult thing for some of our pilots to take. They're just not used to it. It's like they don't believe it, and then they turn around and they land, or they cancel, or they do the right thing, and we're like, hey, great job. And so we've just kind of continued to build around that. And we have to monitor it constantly. We have a video review program. We have our FDM program. So we constantly have to keep an eye on it. It's like there is no set solution for an inadvertent IMC. And that was a big thing to accept too. You can't just put things in place and let it go. It's a constant, continuous monitoring, retraining, reiterating the training, keeping that culture going. And you just got to be careful, because any subtle comment from any manager, or sometimes the CEO goes out and makes a comment, and there's pressure there that they didn't intend, and now you've got people pushing too far towards the weather. And so it's really it's constant, and it's nuanced, and it's delicate, I guess is the way to put it. So
thank you, Eric. Well put. I like that. I'm going to ask now that our other participants come back on, Captain Paul and Captain Ben and Dr. Bill Bramble. If you guys go ahead and join us, and then I'm going to ask Aaron to come up and go ahead and ask one of the first questions. Since we're this far along, I'd like to get some questions from the audience. So if you're up there, Aaron, go ahead and ask your first question.
Thank you, Member Graham. Okay, I wish we could answer all these questions. We had a whole bunch of good ones, but going through, I thought this one was apropos. Originally, it was aimed at open air and aerotech, but I do believe it goes to the entire group. The question is, we have a Navajo and a Cherokee 6 and 4 employees. about as small an operator as you can be. Is there a business case for an SMS for an operator by size?
All right. Captain Paul or Captain Ben, you want to jump on that one right away, and then I'll let somebody else jump in there?
Well, I think if you want to look at it truly from a business standpoint, just advertising that you have this, not just advertising it for the sake of advertising, but, implementing it and showing people that you are actively working towards safe operations. I think that's extremely important, that's at least shown, and then hopefully they'll see it in your practice, especially if they ask, because some people are going to ask, okay, so you say you have a safety program, what are you doing? And I think that from a business side, that will get out, and I think that will definitely help on the business side.
Great. Ben? Captain Ben?
I'd like to add to that and say that for a small operator like Open Air is, and as the questionnaire has, you already have an SMS program because you're trying to be open to learning about your operation and then trying to do something when you find out that there's a safety issue or a risk that you've identified. You're trying to mitigate it, to get rid of it, make sure it's controlled. So you have one, and you just need to make it better. So thinking about what you can do with your existing resources, if it's just yourself managing the operation, try and make sure that you have an open communication with your pilots and mechanics and other employees, and then try and learn. And then when you learn, take action. And when you take action, write down what you learned and did, and see if it's 3 months, 6 months down the line, if it's held. That's an SMS. You have one. You may need to make it better. We all need to make it better, but go ahead. Don't be afraid of the cost. Don't be afraid of the effort. It's well worth it. And then I would just like to add that Open Air is concerned. I'm concerned just how the final FAA rule will come out when it's applied to operations like ours. It should be scalable. It has to be scalable for small operations not to be crushed. And so I just hope that when the FAA writes down how everything has to be done, I'm sure it will be somewhat more bureaucratic than what we have right now. What we have now is not bureaucratic at all. But don't crush programs that are doing good, and don't crush people who are trying to have an effective SMS by putting a burden of documentation or justification onto it, and a big bureaucratic burden. So I heard Dale say at the beginning that this was going to be performance-based. So if you, with your Navajo and your other airplane or two, can show that you're looking for safety issues and you're doing something about it, then that's performance-based, and that's the answer.
Excellent. So does anybody else want to answer that question that has maybe something to put to that, or we'll go on to our next one? Oh, Sean, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, just real briefly, something to remember, this process, I think there's enough evidence out there in the world that it is effective. And the whole point of an SMS is to preserve and protect your revenue. So rather than being reactive and just taking the world as it comes, kind of forces you to lean forward and be proactive, and eventually, when you get good at it, predictive. To see what's the next thing coming that will help you sustain that revenue. And as you say, you're a small operator without a lot of resources. Well, you want to do everything you can to preserve those.
And Maria, did you have something to say also?
I did. I do echo Sean with being proactive and being predictive with decreasing your total liability. Your lawyers and insurance policies are really going to love that. But also, if you do have an active safety program, it does help with insurance to reduce some of those costs. And as far as making a business case to your C-suite and your leadership, but when it comes to making a business case to your employees and and some of these pilots and maybe maintainers that you have, I highly recommend having an ASAP or an MSAP program because these types of voluntary programs, they encourage your FAA certificated employees to speak up when something happens or when something goes awry or when something goes wrong. And on this voluntary program, it protects the airman's license or the airman's certificate from, FAA punitive action, and it protects their job. So the employer can't fire them as long as it's not any of the big five, or anything, that causes, willful intent or gross negligence, any of that kind of stuff, drug usage. But having active participation in these programs I cannot recommend them enough.
Great. Thank you for that. I'm going to let Aaron come on again and ask another question.
Yes, thank you, Member Graham. The next one is about change management. Change management was mentioned a bunch of times during this presentation, but not really delved into. Can you give a good example of change management and how it fits into an SMS? Can you give us an example of what that actually is?
Great question. And Eric, I think a lot of that came up you were talking about. So go ahead, I'll let you start.
Okay. So first, I would say that if you're looking at Part 5 guidance, there's a section that's titled applicability, and I don't remember exactly what the number of the section is, but it lists 4 things, and it's kind of right at the beginning of your safety risk management section in Part 5, and it lists 4 things, and it doesn't specifically say it, but those 4 things are your change management process. So, and it basically says anytime that one of these 4 things happens, you're supposed to conduct the safety risk management process, which is, it's going to involve your risk assessment and your risk matrix typically. And so that's where it's difficult, because those 4 things basically are everything. It's like if you change a policy, if you're implementing a new program, if you're changing a program, or if you identify something that's not effective through your safety assurance program. So like if somebody makes a report and you go, oh shoot, that thing's not working, it can be a lot of things that qualify for it. Now, when you get into the change management process, there's a point where you go, okay, is there any additional risks to this change? And if the answer is no, you've done safety risk management and it's over. If the answer is yes, then you got to get deeper into it. So an example of things that maybe don't get thought of is like you change personnel. For example, like if you're going to change your director of operations, that is a significant change to your operation, and it would require you to risk assess it. And if you have that process honed in, it's not that daunting of a process to do, and you just sit down and kind of go, okay. And for us, when they changed for me, it was like, okay, we need to figure out how to train this person. What does he need training on? And we listed out basically what they were going to do for me to make sure that I was ready to take on the role. So that's an example. If you're going to implement, like, for example, here's another good example, equipment. When we put in our crash resistant fuel tanks, right? We were like, okay, we sat down with maintenance and we sat down with everybody and went, okay, do we see any significant change or risk by implementing this new fuel tank? And I'm going to give you an example of a failure here, but the fuel tank was similar. It went in. It was like, is it going to look different for the pilot? No. Is it, and so based on that, we were like, yeah, there's no real risk. Hey, maintenance, is there a lot of risk for you to implement this thing, to put it in? Is it a normal type of maintenance operation to take the old tanks out and put the new tanks in? They felt like, yeah, there's no risk to that. We're just going to follow the manual. Okay. What happened was that tank, the shape of it, what it did was it led to a shifting arm throughout the entire flight, so that when you did weight and balance at the beginning, that arm shifted to the end, whereas the old tank had a set arm for the fuel, whether it was full or whether it was empty. But because of the shape of the tank, it changed it. And, we didn't realize that at first. And then as we, fortunately, it didn't really, it didn't lead to any change for the pilots. But when we were looking through the manual later, it was like, hey, we never did this. So we had to go back through our weight and balance and make sure we were never out of weight and balance for anything, and then make sure we adjusted the weight and balance to account for that. And had we done the risk management process, the change process more thoroughly, we would have caught that. So those are a couple of examples: equipment, personnel change, and really any change that fits those 4 criteria that are in Part 5. You're supposed to conduct that process, and
Very good examples. Those are excellent. Yeah. Let me ask each one of you a question. I guess kind of when we checked on today, it was one of the things that woke me up in the middle of the night. we do a lot of accidents investigations of operators, especially smaller operators. One, they don't have SMS, or they have maybe some of the parts of a safety management set, but not all of it. But one of them we find is there's nobody from the front office or nobody sharing the operational oversight of the flight. So in the airlines, you got 121, you have the pilot, but you also have the dispatcher. So, they're helping the pre-flight assessments and risk of the weather and everything and the roading and everything. And they're actually tracking during there. So what is each of your operations doing to fulfill that requirement out there? And why don't I start with, let's go ahead and start with Maria.
So when it comes to monitoring these types of things, they are monitored on a daily basis. It's something that we do every day. Our flight scheduling software actually has kind of a checklist almost that goes with every single trip that we have, that ensures that your flight risk assessment tool is conducted. They ensure that our OCC representatives have completed all the tasks, and that they've received their flight release, and that the pilots know where they're going and who they're picking up. And so you can't go to the next task unless that portion of the checklist has been conducted. Now, if we had, utilized our change management, or there was a change to our existing policy or a procedure, or even a regulatory requirement. I know that right now the TSA has some new security directives coming down the pipe, as well as, like PRD and record keeping and whatnot. But our change management tool also goes a step further to include these processes in them for any type of major change to our operation. And we actually go over all of our change management activities at every single quarter safety committee meeting that we host. It's open to everybody in the entire organization. All they have to do is, send me a quick message and say, hey, can I get the link to our next safety committee meeting? I actually think our next one is on Monday. But these are part of the process that is monitored every single day through that checklist on our flight scheduling software to ensure that these tasks are conducted. And, if something does fall through the cracks, or if we miss something, or if an item isn't complete, we can go directly back to that audit trail and find out, okay, where did we fail and why did we fail there? How can we prevent that from happening again?
Excellent.
We also have morning and afternoon briefings. We've got, one that happens first thing in the morning and another one that happens every afternoon. And so that's the continuous monitoring of our daily operations on a micro scale versus the quarterlies that happen on a, more larger scale.
Great. How about Boston Med? What are you doing for participating in the oversight?
So I'll start from the macro level, and we'll go down to the daily oversight. Our company is very strong in our belief that outside auditors provide us with benefit to what we do every day. So we have an annual external auditor that comes in to monitor our safety management system, to provide us with that external set of eyes. We're fortunate that our accountable executive is our chief executive officer, and she takes very seriously that safety is our hallmark. The best thing we can do to assure the proper care for our patients is to get them where they need to go safely. So at the end of the day, that's why we practice a strong safety culture and a safety management system. So in addition to those kind of macro oversights, we also have safety committee that has open discussion every month. We have various working groups that are codified and put in place that provide the constant oversight to not just our aviation program, but as I said earlier, to our ground critical care transport and even our administrative functions here. Mark?
And from a micro level, the operational control of the aircraft is key. As part of our risk assessment process, we have kind of tiered levels of risk. Our pilots in command can launch at a lower level of risk, but as risk increases, they have to involve a tier 1 administrator on call to discuss risk and then mitigate whatever risk that drives that needle up with that tier 1 operator. We discuss several different things, including weather, pilot fatigue, aircraft and any MEL items are there. And then we devise strategies to mitigate that risk. And only when that risk is mitigated to the lowest acceptable level will we authorize that flight to occur. So from the macro level pushing down through the micro level, we have a hand in how we mitigate risk, manage risk, and then either accept the transport request or deny the transport request because the risk can't be mitigated to a level that's acceptable to the organization.
Thank you for that. How about Aerotech?
Yeah, with every leg, we do a frat that's on the pilot, the PIC, and they can delegate to their SIC. And a lot of times we have two captains in the cockpit. But we talk about it, and it's a great for us. The frat is a very good communication tool just amongst the crew. We take that pretty seriously. It's like, oh, we haven't been here before. It's short. It's in the mountains. Okay, so let's talk about this some more. And then, as far as operational control, our we have our people, our DO, and our chief pilot looking over that. We also have, our dispatch center basically is always tracking us. And there's lots of communication back and forth because we do have lots of changes. We'll think we're, done for a day, and then we still have lots of duty time, and we'll reposition somewhere else. And so we got to slow down, do the frats, look at the flight sheets, and what are we doing? And so a lot of it, we try to make it intrinsic with an appropriate amount of oversight. And as we grow, then it's it's going to have to be some more focused oversight from the management side, and that's what we're growing into right now.
Great. How about open air? What are you doing?
Well, thanks for the great discussion from the other participants about the larger part of the charter industries. But I'll speak for the small operators for a second here. Part 135 puts everything on the pilot and command, almost everything on the pilot and command in terms of responsibility. But fortunately, through the fairly recent changes in operational control regulations, the management of the company is getting more involved, and they are very involved at open air. So I mentioned that our release system is very activist. And so the three people who are authorized to release flights are all very careful to thoroughly discuss risks, thoroughly discuss mitigations, make sure the pilots are comfortable on each and every flight that we send out. And like I said, we're a small company. We don't do that many flights per day, so we were able to take care with each one. Of course, once you have sent flights out, you want to find out what really happened out there. And so from a small company perspective, how do we know whether our pilots are compliant and what they're doing out there? So here I recommend really strongly to have a voluntary reporting system. We don't have as extensive one as some of the larger operators, and I want to have a more extensive one. I've described some of the ways to get more people involved, have a bigger system, and get more information about what's really happening. One of the best tools that an operator can have is a LOSA observation, a line operational safety audit, where somebody goes and actually watches what's happening on a flight deck. You were talking about flight operations. It's very difficult to do that with charter. It could be possible, or you could have a LOSA-like thing where somebody's watching. And what I really recommend, and that we're trying to do, is to take the Part 135 line check, which is a requirement for every operator, including the small ones, and make it a real line check, where instead of just having it be part of the annual or semi-annual check rides, that you actually send people out to watch a real flight. Very difficult to achieve sometimes with the loads and weight and balance, but to get folks out there and watch, and it's not perfect, it's not like a LOSA observation, but to get folks out there and watch what's happening is a key to finding out whether your programs and procedures are being followed. Thanks.
Thank you. 7-bar, what are you up to?
Well, I'll frame ours pre-flight and post-flight. Pre-flight, like many of the others, has spoken about using a flight risk assessment tool. We have that process as well. Operational control is delegated to the pilot in command when risk is below a certain level. When it exceeds that level, they're required to contact and a duty manager who is on duty 24/7. They have a conversation to see if there are ways to mitigate and if that flight can or cannot go forward. Ultimately, then that falls on the leadership, takes that burden off of the pilot in command so they don't have to explain that to our customer. That's something that the leadership can take care of. Then post-flight, we utilize our FOCA program. Gives us an opportunity to look at triggered events, look for trends with individual pilots where that occasionally happens, and certainly most effectively looking at the aggregate to look across the operation to see if our programs are effective, our training is resulting in an output that we desire.
Excellent. And I think the last one is Blue Hawaiian.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a very different answer from everybody else. Our flight schedule is monitored, by the pilot supervisors at every base to make sure that it's scheduled appropriately. Then, of course, the PIC makes sure that he's doing the right thing, and then our chief pilot monitors that as well. And everyone's required to do a risk assessment every day for their flight, a pre-flight risk assessment every day for their flight. That risk assessment, of course, it's real similar to what was mentioned, is that as the risk goes up, the required approval for that goes up. So like, for example, we get to the moderate, it's going to require the chief pilot or myself to do it. If it goes up to the high risk, the CEO is going to be involved in it. And with charters, then it has all kinds of other triggers in there for charters. That's where we get in trouble here too, because most of our tours are the same all the time, but every now and then you get something special we put together, and we find a lot of risk with that because it's something different. It's a change, really, is what it is. So that's kind of how we handle the flight schedule and those types of issues. But as far as the remainder of it, we see the safety reporting program itself as a really big oversight. We see all of our employees as the experts and the constant everyday 24-hour audit. Like, they're there always watching, and they know it better than anybody else. So that's a huge piece of how we oversee it, is making sure that they know they're empowered to report and talk about anything that they see or they think, even if it's just a suggestion. Then we have a bi-weekly meeting. We call it an SOC, Safety Oversight Committee, that meets to just discuss, what changes are coming up, risk assessments that are out there, mitigations that are still being worked on, and then new reports that have come in. So we do that every couple of weeks. And then each of our bases gets essentially a line audit twice a year. That's an internal audit program that we do, and that involves flight monitoring and then monitoring the processes at the bases and maintenance. And then we have a couple of external audits that we do right now. We're doing ISBAO, and we're doing TOPS, and then we have the FAA coming in, and we have DOD as well. So we got a lot of people looking at us, and we appreciate all of that feedback from the outside, definitely. One thing that's really unique for us is that we sell in-flight videos of our pilots giving tours, and we've turned that into a flight monitoring program as well, that we use it, for evaluation purposes, but it's also the program itself. The chief pilot and I and the director of safety we view hundreds of flights every year. And, we're looking for just compliance with, we're looking for, their tour, what they're giving on the tour, but more of that program is about their flight routes as far as noise abatement goes. And then, of course, most importantly is, like, how are they handling the weather? Are they making the right decisions early enough to deal with the weather? So,
excellent. Thank you. I see we're running out of time, but I want to give you each just maybe 30 seconds each, or a couple sentences. What would you say to a small operator who hasn't implemented an SMS yet? What piece of advice would you give them? And it's got to be quick, because I know we're way past our time, and then we'll close out. So why don't I go ahead and start with 7-bar?
All right, thank you. As you have said, Member Graham, don't wait. In spite of the NPRM, the basics of SMS are not going to change. So there's work to be done. You can refine it later. And also recognize that you're not going to get it right the first time. You're going to write it and you're going to rewrite it. Accept that. It's called continuous improvement for a reason. And you're not losing ground by doing that.
Excellent. How about Aerotech?
My biggest thing is just start. I mean, just start something. And like Sean just said, you'll change and you'll have to make it work for your organization. But if you don't start, then you're not going to do it.
Excellent. Okay. How about Boston Midflight?
Buy-in from everyone. If you have an SMS program that doesn't have buy-in from your line level employees, you have an SMS manual that sits on a shelf and does you no good. You need to start from the beginning with getting people involved in it, making sure training is in place to make sure that you have buy-in from every employee, that SMS matters to them and it matters to everyone in the group.
Well put. All right, Dr. Bramble, I'm going to let you have a word in here too. What would you say to him? Oh, can't unmute. Why don't you work on it? I'll go to open air right now.
Well, I would say just get started and start by just, get some information, learn something, and then think about it, and then do something about it, and then make sure it worked. That's it in a nutshell. Just start doing that, and then we'll hope that we can just keep going that way and not really be crushed by what should be scalable, but might turn into a big administrative burden.
I hope not. Dr. Bramble, you got it figured out now or no? Oh, no. I guess not. How about Hawaiian Air or Blue Hawaiian? Excuse me.
Sorry, I'm back on here.
Oh, okay, go for it, and then we'll go to Eric.
Yeah, I think a lot of the key points have been captured. That you need buy-in, you need effective risk assessment, you need safety assurance. One thing I might point out is that I felt was particularly valuable about the approach that Eric described was that a lot of times the hazards you see every day are not the same as the ones that sometimes lead to the rarer but catastrophic accidents. So it's important to look further afield for the type of operation that you have and see what the biggest risks are for that type, as well as what you're seeing, just in your neighborhood.
Excellent. Okay, Eric, you're up.
I would say you can absolutely do it. It's absolutely worth it. Try not to think of it as a way to generate revenue or insurance benefits. Think of it as we'll mitigate the risk first. We'll implement this, and all of that's going to follow behind it. It's so much more effective if you think of it as an effective program first. That's going to lead to all those benefits after. And the last thing I would say is, if you have any questions, call me. I'm more than happy to talk to you. 808-442-8020.
Thank you for that. And Maria, I guess you get the last word.
I would say come with passion for your people. If you invest in your people, they will take care of your operation for you. Take advantage of mentorship opportunities and some of these industry affiliations. They can help you along your journey. We're happy to share lessons learned and overall this, continual desire to be of service to the industry. Shout out to my team. I am so humbled by the team and other organizations that I get to work with and interface with every single day. And, please don't hesitate to reach out to me either. And I'm very humbled to be able to assist you today, Member Graham, and thank you for the opportunity and for letting us, be of service to your cause.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And now we need to move to the closing because we're well past time. So participants, please turn off your cameras and mute your microphones. Thank you all for participating and for the interesting and engaging discussion and for your valuable real-world insights about why it is important for operations of all sizes to implement an SMS and how an SMS can be scalable to the size and scope of your operation. Thank you to everyone at the NTSB who worked hard behind the scenes to put this webinar on and make it successful. And thank you to everyone who took the time out of your busy day to tune in to this discussion. This has certainly been an informative discussion for me. But more importantly, I hope that each and every one of you listening will walk away knowing that an SMS can be scalable to any sized operation. That concludes our webinar. Please note that a recording of this session will be available within about 1 week on our YouTube site. Thank you and have a wonderful day.